factor, and if customers like it, they will tell other customers that it is a good product or a good service that we are delivering. That will attract new customers, and since the customers are already happy, they will stay. They will have repeat buying, and so we increase our market share, and that way we increase our profitability. So that's the external route, so to speak, why quality is important. And we also have an internal route why quality is important. That's more the operations focus or supply chain focus. We say, well, if you have better quality, then we have less crime, less firefighting, less troubles, and that will increase our profitability also, and thereby our profitability. So there's always these two things that go hand in hand, and here it is for quality. Basically, you can do that for all these things. Now, if we get into quality a little bit, then quality is a very big concept with all kinds of dimensions. But for understanding it from an operations and supply chain perspective, it's important to distinguish between what we call quality of design and quality of conformance. So quality of design is basically, is this a very nice product or service to the customers? And quality of conformance is, do we actually make it according to the standards? Let me give two examples here. Let's assume I have two cars. I have a Toyota Aygo and I have a Ferrari. In real life, I actually do own a Toyota Aygo, but not a Ferrari. I have another Toyota car. But let's assume we have these two cars, and we are wondering which of these two has the best quality. And the first thing you might wonder is the quality of design. How much value is there to that car in the marketplace? Which of these two cars would have the highest quality of design? The Ferrari, right? And there are always people say, no, wait a minute. No, the Ferrari is a nicer car. It looks better. It goes faster. You can really make the blitz with the Ferrari and not with the Toyota. So from a design perspective, obviously the Ferrari has a better design, and that's why at least some people are willing to pay more money for that than for the Aygo. So the design is better, but it might be that on a given day I have the two cars and I want to go drive in my Ferrari, and I turn the key and the engine doesn't start on a particular day. It might happen. And then I say, it doesn't work, but I have to go to work. So let me go to my Aygo and I turn the key and it runs smoothly and everything is okay. On that particular day, even though the quality of design of the Ferrari might be better, the quality of conformance of the Toyota is better. So it actually does what it is supposed to do. This is the difference. Another example, it might be that you don't like the course operations and supply chain. It's hard to imagine, but it's also hard to imagine that I own a Ferrari. So let's imagine that you don't like the course. It might be due to two things. You might say, well, it's totally the wrong topics are there, and why should we have the two cases, and the two cases are old, or the topics are not right. And then you say the design of the course is not according to my needs. It's not what I'm looking for. You might also say, no, the design is fine, but we always get the sheets late. We never know what to do. Our homework is unclear. Van der Veen doesn't speak proper English, or whatever you might think. Then the design is okay, but the delivery, the conformance is not up to standard. So these are two different dimensions. Now, if we are in operations, which we are today, we are in operations, which of these two is most important to us? Of course, everything is important, but which of these two we really care about in operations? Design or conformance?
Conformance.
Conformance, right? Yeah. I'm a bit puzzled here because typically I get, it depends. No, it doesn't depend. It is the correct answer. We are most concerned with conformance. Of course, also the design is important to us. But the conformance is really what operations people are worried about. We get a standard, our engineers tell us to produce something or a service, and we want to do that to the best of our ability. And whether that is a good design or not, that is, who's most concerned with design typically in an organization? Sales, especially marketing people. Marketing are wondering, what do people actually like? Or engineers, they come up with all kinds of bright new product developments that people might actually like. But in operations, we are most concerned with conformance. A very interesting model that I've been able to use frequently in my working life is the model which is called the cost of quality. A bit of a strange concept, but actually you're wondering how much does it cost to produce good quality. So that is what is there, and the idea is that the total cost of producing quality consists of two parts. We have the control cost and we have the failure cost. Now, failure cost is the cost of something going wrong and you have to redo it. You have to repair it, or you have to satisfy the customers who get a wrong product. So as soon as you fail, you have to do something to make up for that. And that is again distinguished in internal failure cost and external failure cost. What would be the difference? When would something be internal failure and external failure?
External if it's with the customer.
Yeah, exactly. So we call it an external failure cost if the customer already has received the product or the service, and then something is wrong and you have to give warranties or have to deliver a new product in order to replace it, etc. And internal, it's still in the process. You see something is wrong before you send it out, you repair it. The customer never knows that you have made a mistake in your own process. Which of these two would be more expensive, internal or external?
External.
External is far more expensive. Why is that?
Because you have to get the products back.
Yeah, you have to get it back, all kinds of logistics involved, but reputation loss, right? So here there's no reputation loss because nobody sees it, but here there is a reputation loss associated to it. Frequently we hear about product recalls, and which is an external failure cost. It's already there, you have to bring it back, you have to make a repair. This is all external failure. Okay, that's the one hand. And on the other hand, we have the control cost, and the control cost is everything that we do in our power in order to prevent failures from happening. This is what we call our quality system, so to speak. And there again, we have two types of cost, the appraisal cost, so the cost for doing actual testing, and the prevention cost. What would be part of prevention cost typically? So what could we do in order to prevent mistakes from? Sorry? Yeah, training. Yeah, educating our people and doing all kinds of systems in place. So one is for checking and the other one is for prevention. Now, and as you can see, this guy, Philip Crosby, once wrote a famous book and he said, quality is free. And quality is free means it doesn't cost you anything. You can get better quality for the same or lower cost. And that of course, is the idea of that you can reduce your scrap and your firefighting and overcoming or preventing all kinds of problems from happening. So what basically the idea of Philip Crosby was saying, well, if you have cost here, you should actually shift them there. It's better to prevent than to have failures. So you should invest more in your control cost in order to ensure that your failure cost doesn't go up. So if you have a lot of cost here, then you should simply invest here. That will cost you money, but the benefit will be that you don't have a failure cost. You have better quality at a lower price. Quality is free. Now, if we go back to our previous concept, quality of design or quality of conformance, what is this Crosby guy talking about? Quality of design or quality of conformance? If we say quality is free. He's only talking about conformance. Quality of conformance in his statement is free. But if you invest in your control system, in your quality control system, then you don't have the trouble. But the quality of design is not free, obviously. A Ferrari you don't get for the price of a Toyota Aygo. It is inherently more expensive to produce a Ferrari than a Toyota Aygo, because better materials go in it and more engineering, God knows what. So if we talk about quality is free, it's typically an operations perspective that we are having, and we're talking quality of conformance, not quality of design. That's a totally different dimension. Like I said, this is something that I've been able to use quite frequently in my working life, especially in the Dutch construction industry. Who's working there? Dutch construction industry. They actually have a lot of failure costs. About 5 billion euros per year in the Dutch environment. Is that a lot? 5 billion euros?
On the total.
It depends a little bit on the total revenue, so to speak. It's about 15 to 20% of total revenue. Okay, 15 to 20% is failure cost. Is that a lot?
Yeah, that's a lot.
It's huge. What is the, let's say, profit margin of a construction firm? Any idea? 5%. If they have 5%, then we have champagne and we have a big party, because 5% is a very high percentage. So they have a 5% max profit, and there is 15 to 20% of failure cost. Here in Amsterdam, we have the North-South line. We know enough, but how much money went in there, things went wrong, or the reconstruction of the Rijksmuseum, same story, a lot of failure costs. So I do a lot of consulting, or academic consulting, I would say. And this is, so I say to these people, actually the place that you're at here, at this graph, we have quality level here, and we have cost there. The place that you're at is at A. You have pretty high failure cost. The failure cost is pretty high. And what you should do is invest in control cost. And what is control cost? Well, you should install all kinds of information systems, for instance, they call it BIM, building information management, basically IT systems in which everybody knows what's going on, instead of everything doing on paper. And I have version 15, but already version 22 was there, but I never knew it, and so all these things go wrong. So you should invest in that. And what do these people say? Yeah, but that's costing a lot of money. Yeah, I understand it's costing you a lot of money, but you will reduce your failure cost. I have a hard time convincing them, but this graph typically pulls it up. Okay, let's take a look at this. So we have the total cost is basically adding of the red line and the blue line, right? Okay, let's first take a look at the shape of the red line. It says that the failure cost goes down when the quality level is better. Is that correct?
No.
Yeah, it's a Tuesday night and you might be a bit sleepy or whatever, and other things on your mind, but this is by definition, right? So if your quality level goes up, then you have less failures and less failure cost. So that goes down. The blue line is increasing. That if you need a better quality level, then you have to invest more in your control system. Does that make sense? Yeah,
no.
It also doesn't make sense, right? So we have an increase in control cost, and then obviously the total cost is just adding them up. So basically the total cost is associating the quality level. Now there are three situations that you can be in, A, B, or C. So the construction industry is an A. Is that an acceptable place to be?
No.
From an operations perspective? No. Why not? Why is A not an acceptable position to be
It's
in?
not
Better B,
optimal. B.
Same cost, high quality, low failure.
I get that later, but there's actually one place that's even.
Yeah, in fact, a part of your total cost, your failure cost is more than your control cost. That's also perspective. If you are at A.
Okay, let's compare A to B. To start with. A to B. What do we have here at A? Higher or lower cost? Higher cost. Do we have better or lower quality? Lower quality. So we have higher cost and lower quality. What does it say? If we are in A, we're actually in what I demonstrated in the previous lecture, in the red zone. We are not efficient. We can achieve better quality at lower cost. This is unprofessional operations. So you're not as good as you could be. So B, the B position is always better than the A position. So if you're at A, we would say, oh, that's not good. You can move to B, lower cost, better quality. Everybody happy. Okay, let's now assume we are at C. Would that be an acceptable position?
Can be. Yeah.
It depends. Now we can give our favorite answer. It depends. Yeah, it depends on what?
Margin.
Yeah.
I think it has a higher.
It's not my. It's correct, but it's not my.
It's higher
favorite
cost than B.
Sorry?
Because it has higher cost than B.
Yeah.
And it depends. It depends.
Yeah, it depends, it's fine. It does depend, but on what?
It depends on the quality level that we choose.
Depends on your strategy.
Yeah, it depends on
Your strategy.
your strategy. Which one is more important? Or said differently, what exactly is the trade-off, like you said, between the two? But fundamentally here at C, we have better quality at higher cost. Is that acceptable? Yeah, depending on your strategy. If in your strategy quality is very much important and cost not so much, then this is fine. However, if cost is very important and your quality is not so important, then probably that's not a good idea. Then you would say, oh, I'd rather be at B. So if we see here, then we see exactly what's going on. If you move from here, from A to B, we are moving from the red in this figure. Where are we? To the green line. But once we are on the green line, it's a matter of trade-off or elasticity, as you wish, or it depends on strategy, where you want to be. And that's exactly what's happening here on these curves. Right, so this is a fully acceptable position to be in. You say, I just don't allow failures. Any organization that actually want to be in that place?
Ferrari, yeah.
Hospitals, Ferraris, type of
Airplanes.
thing. Sorry?
Airplane.
Airplanes, definitely. Yeah, the government frequently. If a bad thing happens, then we launch 100 new rules. And then everybody says, yeah, bureaucracy, a lot of rules. Yeah, but this should never happen again. Yeah, and that's costing us money, yeah, sure, but that's the choice that we make. So yes, this is a fully acceptable position. Okay, so you see that connecting these trade-offs can really help you in determining whether something is good or bad. Okay, any questions on this? If not, we move on to the topic of the day, which is design. Well, actually, it's two topics. It's process analysis and operations design. They're pretty much connected. So again, like I already said, once we have determined the strategy, then the next issue that we have is to see, hey, how have we designed our processes? How have we designed the supply chain? Where are our locations and stuff like that. So I will pick up bits and pieces from this whole design issues. This is for our list of today. I start with process analysis and do that deterministic and then stochastic, and then we get to typical models in design, which is the process matrix and the order penetration points. Okay, but let's start with the process analysis and then do that in a deterministic way and a stochastic way. What is the difference? Deterministic, stochastic?
One is random.
Yeah. So at stochastic, we have all kinds of probability distribution, random distribution, normal distribution, Poisson distribution, all kinds of stuff like that. At deterministic, we don't have that. Everything is kind of fixed. Why would we do anything deterministic? What is the advantage there?
You can calculate.
It's easy. It's easy. The world without all these distributions, the world without statistics is much easier than the world of statistics. I think there are quite a few people who would agree to that. Why on earth would we then do stochastic?
Guess it's more realistic.
Yeah, it's more realistic. It's more to reality. The reality is not deterministic. There are all kinds of uncertainties there. So we start simple and then we get realistic. Right? Okay, so we are looking at processes, and already last week I introduced the process flow diagram. Recall, we have the yellow boxes and we have the red triangles and we have these black arcs in between. And basically that helps us in drawing a process. What was the difference between the yellow box and the red triangle?
Added value.
Added value, no added value. This is a queue or a waiting list or an inventory where stuff is just lying to be moved on in the process. Okay, so the entire thing between the dotted line is what we call the process. The process is a group of activities, so different things that we are doing that is creating something for the customer. It's also sometimes called the system. The system and the process here is exactly the same. So everything between the dotted line is the process. And then we have jobs arriving here, so they come in, they go from left to right here. So they come in the process, and then they are processed at the first activity. And so typically we have a resource there, a machine or a person doing something, and then we have some processing time, as we call it. So that is the time that a job, a task takes for this resource to be processed. So if you do a copying, that takes 5 minutes, then the processing time is 5 minutes, and then the job moves on. Sometimes we have some transportation time, then that is added here. If nothing is added, there's no transportation time, it's just a handoff. Then we have some queue time here, some in the inventory, and then it moves on for the second activity, again, some processing time. And then finally, when everything is completed, it departs the system again, the job is done. Okay, so we are going to look at these processes, and we're going to see some characteristics, some typical dimensions there. The first thing to look at is what we call the throughput time. So in the throughput time, we follow a job from arrival to departure, and we are wondering how much time does it spend in the process in the system. And so here we have a simple example. So a job arrives here, and then it moves through the process. And we, at the throughput time, we look actually at two things: the minimal throughput time, or what we call the theoretical throughput time, and the actual throughput time. Okay, let's start with the theoretical throughput time. In the theoretical throughput time, we only look at the actual times that we do need. So what is discarded here? What is not in the list? All the waiting time, all the queuing time. So we say if a job just moves on, it's a rush job, so to speak. If we do everything as fast as we can, how long will the job take? Well, here's pretty simple. We take 12 minutes here, 2 minutes, then 1 minute for transportation, another 15. If we add everything up, then we say that the throughput time of a job is 40 minutes. Okay, it's pretty straightforward. Sometimes things get a little bit more complex. Sometimes we do have assembling. What is the idea of assembling? Then we have two components or two parts of a service, and then we combine them into a final product. So here we have a part A and a part B, and then here they are assembled into the final product, and then they move out. If we are now wondering what is the throughput time of a job here, then the upper half takes 40 minutes and the lower half takes 28 minutes. But of course, we need both components, so we cannot do the assembling before both components are there. Hence, this is the bottleneck. It takes 40 minutes and then another 20 minutes at the assembling, so a total of 60 minutes. So this is what we call the theoretical throughput. We just follow a job through the process. We also can look at the actual throughput time, and the actual throughput time is just the amount of time that goes on your watch from start to finish. So we enter it here, and we are going to look on our clock, how long does it take here. So next to the theoretical throughput time, we now also have the waiting times in the queues. So all the time that the job spent there, of course, goes into actual throughput time, but it's not part of your theoretical throughput. And so a very important performance measure in operations and supply chain is what we call throughput efficiency. Throughput efficiency is the theoretical throughput time over the actual throughput time, or the value time over the elapsed time, the time on your watch. What is the maximum value that we get out of this? Best possible value? 1, right? If there's no waiting time, then these two are equal. What is the lowest possible time that we get out of this?
Couldn't you be faster than you thought you would be?
No. Yeah, everything is possible in real life, but this is theoretical. We say, no, you cannot do it faster. How could we do this faster?
You overestimated.
Sorry?
If you overestimated, if your original estimate is too high.
Yeah, so if these numbers are wrong, then, or if there's some randomness in there, then, but this is all deterministic, and you cannot skip activities, so we would say this is really the minimal time. You cannot do it faster than that. Okay, what's the minimal throughput efficiency? Maximum is 1. 100% we say, what's the minimum?
Near to 0.
Yeah, asymptotic to 0, right? So we say the throughput efficiency is a number between 0 and 100%, and the higher it is, the better we are off, right? What are we actually measuring here out of our key performance measures? Throughput efficiency
Speed.
is a matter of speed. We are measuring speed. How fast does a task flow through the entire process? Does any one of you measure that in their operations?
No.
You do? How do you do that? Explain a little bit to the class.
Well, yeah,
Do we-
we process data. So how
Yeah.
long does it take? When does data becomes available?
Okay.
How much time do you have to run other
Yeah.
processes?
So what is your throughput efficiency on average?
No idea.
No idea. You do measure it, but you have no idea. Okay.
Also to measure it, we very recently switched to the way of agile working.
Mhm.
So every 2 weeks we are making a chart,
Yeah.
which we are estimating how many tasks we're gonna complete within 2 weeks, and at the end of the 2 weeks we are looking at how many of them we have completed.
Now, that's a number of tasks. It's not so much the throughput efficiency is pretty much related. I can give you that. But
But also have something about how much time we're spending.
basically, it's how long you're working. If you do agile kind of processing, which probably many of you do, that has a clear speed advantage, right? And that means that you have less jobs in the entire process. Okay, in operations and supply chain, this is an ever increasing measure of efficiency of your organization. So if you really want to be good, then your throughput efficiency should be high. We'll see it a couple of times later, especially when we move into the improvement part. Because there we'll see, for instance, in lean management, this is a very important performance measure. If we have, for instance, a moving assembly line, I don't see this, but this is Boeing that have this moving assembly line. Where you move the planes there, they have all the stations working on it. What would be the throughput efficiency there? Any idea?
Planes per week or
No, it's a percentage, right? So
It should be.
we are not measuring planes per week. We are measuring what is the throughput efficiency. So a number between 0 and
Okay.
100%.
100%.
So what time are we actually working on completing the plane versus what is the total throughput time? 80. Yeah, it gets as high as 90 to 95%. If you have a very smooth running assembly line, car manufacturing, plane manufacturing might actually reach some 90, 95%. What would be the throughput efficiency of a lawsuit? The moment it's filed, finally the judge says, and this is my ruling,
5%?
5%.
Asymptotically zero.
Asymptotically zero.
Yeah.
Yeah, frequently we don't even measure it in the percentage anymore. Yeah, it gets as low as below 1%. How come? What's the problem?
A lot of waiting time.
No efficiency.
Sorry?
No efficiency.
Yeah, there's no efficiency. Throughput efficiency is very low, so there's no efficiency. But why?
Waiting.
Waiting time.
It's
Yeah, there's a lot of waiting time. So this should really get to your head. This is waiting. There's a lot of waiting time. It's not a matter of people not doing their work efficiently. No, there's a lot of waiting time there. And why would there be so much waiting time in such a process?
Too many cases,
Yeah, there's too many cases.
gathering evidence.
Yeah, but gathering evidence is a value-adding activity.
Every activity is different.
Yeah,
A lot of
True.
different communication.
yeah, there's a lot of.
The judge is
Everything is disconnected
Bottleneck.
basically. So
Yeah.
this is one resource, this is another resource, and these people are basically having their own ideas of what comes first, what has the highest priority, and when we should have a ruling. So everybody works independently, and if it works independently, we have long queue times. Actually, you might recall the case that I was talking about of an external professor fighting, and that it took forever. That the throughput efficiency is very low. It could be solved within a day, but it's basically working independently and people having all the priorities. It's like a lawsuit. So throughput efficiency can be very high, moving assembly, or can be very low, depending a little bit on the situation. A political asylum request, any idea?
Very high.
almost negative.
Yeah.
It's a bit of an awkward process actually, because it's, for me, it's the only process in which I know that people are deliberately having a low throughput efficiency. So the Dutch government doesn't want to have a high throughput efficiency in political asylum requests. Whereas from a operation perspective, we say better speed is always better, right? But here apparently that is not the case. Any idea why?
You want to minimize.
Yeah. Well, we don't want customers basically. We want to discuss our customers, because if we are very good to our customers, then we might attract new customers. And so, okay, in the political arena, that is not something that we are looking at. But again, there it's pretty low. There's a lot of waiting time. Anyway, so we see here this throughput efficiency. Last week I was talking about material processors, information processors, and people processors. What do we call that? A hospital is a people processor because it's the people that move on there, and in manufacturing we are material processors, and most of you guys are information processors that do something with information. So of these three, where would throughput efficiency be most important? At material processors, manufacturing type of things, at information processors, or at people processors? Where would it matter most, throughput efficiency?
Depends.
It depends. Very good.
Yeah.
Information.
Well, I mean, if you care about the lives of people, then yeah, then the people part. But then again,
Of course, it matters everywhere, right?
Yeah.
So if you with your information, if you delay that too long, the information is not valid anymore, and you have to do something with it. And same holds for material. If you process that too long, then it might also go waste. But the answer, my favorite answer here, would be at the people processors. Why would it matter so much for the people processors?
People don't like waiting.
People don't like waiting. Material don't care waiting. Information doesn't care waiting. They are not knocking your door saying, "Hey, what's going on?" But people hate waiting. So if it's the people that are processed and they are waiting very long, then they start creating a difficulty. Now, your first case, the Massachusetts PATA case, group case, is basically on looking at the throughput efficiency of that particular system. You'll see that there's a lot of waiting time that needs to be analyzed, and that's what this case is all about. So one of the questions in the case is, what is the throughput efficiency here actually? That situation. Okay. That is one aspect that we're looking at, throughput time or throughput efficiency. Another characteristic of a system is the capacity. And the capacity already was mentioned a couple of times. How many items can we make in a given time frame? So that is, if you look at a single resource, that's actually pretty simple. So if we have an activity and we take 12 minutes per job, and we are wondering how many jobs can we do in a given day. So if we have 8 working days, then obviously if you do 12 minutes per job, then you can do 5 jobs per hour, right? And if you have an 8-hour working day, then obviously you have a 40 jobs per day capacity. Very complex calculation here, but the idea is pretty straightforward. So the capacity is pretty much related to the processing time. Once you know the processing time, you know the capacity, and the other way around. So these are related. Sometimes we have so-called parallel processing. Pretty well known at the supermarket. If you have filled your cart and you move to the checkout, then there are multiple checkout registers and you take only one. But since there are multiple, they have a higher capacity. So that is the same idea here. We have a job arriving, and the job might go either to checkout 1, 2, or 3, only one of these 3. But if we look at it from the capacity point of view, we can add the capacities of these resources. So this one has a capacity of 5 jobs per hour. This has 6 jobs per hour. This can do 4 jobs per hour. And together, therefore, we can do 15 jobs per hour. So if we have multiple resources and we do them in parallel, we increase our capacity in this way. Now, also at capacity, we have multiple measures, which is listed here. We have the design capacity, which is actually the maximum capacity that we can get out of it. Then we have what we call the effective capacity, is the capacity that we can have minus the scheduled downtimes. planned downtimes, and then we have the actual realized capacity is in hindsight, we see how much output do we have, and we compare that to our design capacity. So this is really the maximum that we can do. The effective capacity is we have scheduled some downtime, so we subtract that, and the realized capacity is just looking. So let's say we have one person working 8 hours a day, then we have a capacity of 8 hours. But if we say, well, you have half an hour lunchtime, and we have a quarter hour for coffee and a quarter hour for TV, so we have a scheduled downtime for you for an hour, then your actual effective capacity is only 7 hours. But if on a given day this person has only worked for 3 hours, then that is what we call the realized capacity. Now, if we are in operations, which of the two gaps would be most concerning to us? The gap between design capacity and effective capacity? Would we be worried by that? Or would we be worried by the difference between effective capacity and realized capacity? So we are managing this, so which gap would be worrying to us? The red block or the yellow block?
I think both.
It depends. Now you have to choose.
The other one.
Right, the other one. Because this is what you scheduled yourself. You have a scheduled downtime, so that's what you did yourself. And this happens randomly, so to speak. Something that you did not plan for does actually happen. So you're typically worried about that. Actually, the red gap has a good side and a bad side to it. Why wouldn't we like the red gap? Why is that bad to us? Why would we care to that minimal? Sorry? Yeah, underutilization. Why is that bad for us?
You're losing capacity, right?
Yeah, you're
Because
losing
you're not-
capacity,
you're
so why
not-
is that bad for us?
Because you're not efficient.
I have to train you, right? You have to think in performance. What goes
Cost.
wrong if we have a large red gap?
Less speed.
Cost. Usually higher cost, because we have to pay for the resource anyway, and if the resource is not working, then we spend money, but we don't get anything out of that, so it's costing us money. So typically that's a cost concern. Utilization is frequently a measure for cost. But there's also a good side to it. What would be the good side to the red gap? Why would we sometimes like it?
You get more budget.
More quality.
Okay, on budget. Political thinking, absolutely correct, but that's not in operations. We are apolitical. Quality? Yeah, possibly, because people are not working very hard, but it offers you flexibility. That's actually the more important one. It offers you flexibility, because if the volume increases, you say, hey, people, normally I give you a half-hour break, but today you have to work. If your operation is a 24/7 three-shift operation, and you have to increase your volume, there's no way in which you can do it. If you have only one shift, you might say, hey, I add another shift. At least I have some flexibility in my volume. So it does offer some benefits in terms of quality, but especially flexibility. There's a trade-off there. So sometimes you keep an overcapacity just to be able to be flexible according to volume. Okay, anyway, for you to remember is we have design capacity, effective capacity, and realized capacity. Concept pretty well known in manufacturing is that sometimes we have setup times. So we have a resource and you need to set up the resource to prepare the resource for actually performing a set of tasks or jobs, which we call a batch. What would be real life examples of setting up a machine or a resource? You first have to prepare the resource for doing jobs.
Heating an induction furnace.
Sorry?
Heating up an induction
Yeah.
furnace.
Heating up a furnace. First you need to heat it up before you put stuff in. People who are into cooking know this. Don't put it immediately in, wait before. So that's the setup time.
Training.
Sorry?
Training.
Yeah, training. Yeah, quickly if I open my computer in the morning, it has to boot first. That's a setup time. If I do the washing machine, I have to prepare it. Coloring machine, there are all kinds of machines, especially machines that need to be started up. Some people have to drink coffee and to chat for half an hour first before they can start working. That's a setup time. I need to be set up first before I can do work. Anyway, this is the idea, right? So we have a setup time, and then only we can work with your jobs. Now the problem with setup times is that they eat away capacity from your resource. If you are setting it up, you're setting it up and not actually doing tasks. And so we might wonder in certain instances, if we have a certain way of handling it, what the effective capacity is. Okay, so here I have a machine that's available for 8 hours per day, and jobs arrive in batches of 5, and each job takes 10 minutes. So we get groups of 5 in, and each job takes 10 minutes. But for each group, I need to prepare the machine to set up the machine. That takes 15 minutes. And we are now wondering what is the effective capacity of this machine. Okay, let's first do what is the design capacity of this machine. How many jobs can it do per hour? Design capacity. Really maximum.
62.
A job takes 10 minutes. How many jobs can I then do per hour? Or 6, right? So once I've set it up and then only I'm doing it, then the design capacity is 6 jobs per hour. But now I'm setting it up so that it eats away time. So I have some scheduled downtime, so to speak. So now I'm wondering what is my effective capacity. So here first I have 50 minutes, and then 5 times 10. So that eats 50 plus the 50. 65, and then the whole sequence repeats. So every 65 minutes I can complete 5 jobs. So 5 jobs in 65 minutes, and then I do some odd calculations, and that turns out to be 4.62 jobs per hour. Now, if I want to have a higher effective capacity, should I increase my batch size or decrease my batch size? Okay, batch size here is batch of 5. So the batch size is 5. But I can also have batches of 10 or 20 or 100 or whatever it is. So if I want to increase my effective capacity, should I have higher batch sizes or lower batch sizes?
Simply higher.
Higher, right? Okay, so your capacity, your effective capacity depends on your batch size. And in operations, frequently people want to have large batches in order to use their capacity, because then we don't have all the setup times. And the smaller the batches are, the more setup time we have, the lower the capacity is. In other words, the effective capacity depends on the batch size. So this is pretty much a driver for operations to have very long batches, because then we are efficient. That's what they are saying. Okay, the next question is, do we have sufficient capacity in order to meet the demand? Is there a match between demand and supply? Already addressed that issue a little bit last week. So do we have sufficient capacity? Now, then we need to match that to the demands, and the demand is a bit strange here, but the demand is how many jobs are arriving here in this process. So jobs come in, how many do actually come in, and that is our demand. We can take that from 2 measures. We can say what is the number of jobs per hour that arrive here. That is the arrival rate. You would say the arrival rate is 12 jobs per hour. So 12 jobs per hour do arrive here. And we are wondering whether we have sufficient capacity. Do we? 12 jobs per hour arrive here. Yeah, what is our capacity here? Well, 15, right? Because we can do, if we do 4 minutes, then we can do 15 in an hour. And if 12 arrive, we have a capacity of 15, so we are totally okay. We can also say if 12 per hour arrive, then on average, every 5 minutes, a new job comes in. This is known as the inter-arrival time. IET is the inter-arrival, so the time between 2 jobs. So a job arrives, how long does it take for the next job to arrive? And since everything is deterministic here, we assume here that every 5 minutes a job arrives. If we take it from that angle, we say every 5 minutes job arrives, and we process it for 4, you can also see that we have sufficient capacity. Is it right? A job arrives, we process it for 4 minutes, then we have 1 minute idle time, nothing to do. Then the next one comes in, we process it for 4 minutes, etc., etc. So if you want to determine whether we have sufficient capacity, you can say we look at the arrival rate and compare that to the capacity, or we can look at the inter-arrival time and compare that to the processing time. Same idea. Like I already said, the batch size determines the effective capacity. If you have larger batches, then your effective capacity goes up. And then we get nice exercises like this one. So we have an inter-arrival time of 8 minutes, and we spend 6 minutes per job, and we have a setup time of 30 minutes. And we are wondering, how large should our batch size be in order to be able to process this? A mathematical exercise. We like this. Oh, well, no one else likes it. But we like it here. If our batch size is 1, will it work? It will never work, because if the batch size is 1, then on each job we spend 30 plus 6 minutes, 36 minutes. Jobs come in every 8 minutes, so that will never work. So if our batch size is 2, then we have 30 minutes plus 2 times 6, that's 42. On average, that's 21 per job. That's already better, but still not good enough. And so the larger the batch becomes, the better it's up. So how large should the batch size be? 15. 15. Of course, you can just go here and see it should be 15, but we can also see it immediately without all the harsh computations. Why 15?
30 divided by 2.
Yeah. The gap here between 8 and 6 is 2 minutes, so we need 2 minutes can be spent on the setup, and yeah, we need 15 jobs to split to the 30. So indeed, it's 15. If we want a more neat calculation, then we can do it like this. So the demand rate is 7.5 jobs per hour, the arrival rate, and our capacity should be higher than this demand rate. And so here we say, well, let X be the batch size. Then on each batch, we spend 30 minutes plus 6 times X. And so X jobs in 30 plus 6 times minutes, and then we do all the calculations, and then no surprise, 15 comes out. The important thing is not the calculation, the important thing is the idea that our batch size is determining our capacity. By playing with the batch sizes, we can match it to the demand. Okay, next concept. The concept of what we call flow rate of a system, and associated with that is the bottleneck. Here I have all the nice definitions, but typically if I start explaining the definitions, everybody gets lost, and so we better have an example, and then the idea becomes pretty clear, hopefully. So what we have here is that we look at the capacity not of a single resource, but the capacity of a process. We are wondering how much tasks, how many jobs can the process handle. And so here I have a very simple process with 4 activities, and each activity has a given processing time, and from that we can immediately calculate what the capacity of each step is. So here we can do 5 jobs, here we can do 6, here 4, here we can do 10, and now we are wondering what's the capacity of the entire system, and if you start thinking about that, immediately you will recognize, hey, that's determined by the lowest number here, which we call the bottleneck. So here we would say that the capacity of this entire system is determined by the bottleneck. So if we talk about capacity of a system or of a process, the first thing that you should think is bottleneck. Capacity is determined by the bottleneck. What would happen if 5 jobs would arrive here per hour? So 5 jobs per hour would come in. What would happen? Can it be handled here? No problem. Can it be handled here?
Yeah.
No problem. Can it be handled here? No. 5 jobs come in, we can only handle 4, and that's of course where the difficulty starts, and that's why we call this the bottleneck. You cannot push more through than the 4 that we actually have. The capacity of the system is determined by the bottleneck. We say then that the flow rate here is the speed of the bottleneck, 4 jobs per hour, and the takt time is the processing time of the bottleneck. But basically the takt time is every 15 minutes, one job comes out of the system. One job is completed. So 15, 15, 15, 15. Determined by the bottleneck.
So the flow rate and the takt time, basically the same thing in different.
Yeah. So the flow rate is let's say the capacity of the system, and the takt time is the processing time of the bottleneck. Okay, a little bit more complicated situation. So here we have the tasks coming in, then we have some setup times here, and then they are split between two parallel processing. So either it goes there or it goes there, and then it's moved out. And so we are wondering here, what's the flow rate here? Well, let's start with the capacity of each system. Here we say, well, we have batch size of 6, setup time of 10 minutes. So, and we do 5 minutes per job. So the 6 jobs takes 30 minutes, plus the setup time is 40 minutes. So we can do 6 jobs in 40 minutes, hence 9 jobs per hour. Here we have a capacity of 6. Here we have a capacity of 5, but since these are parallel, we can add them up. So that's a total of 11. So the bottleneck of this system is determined here. But we see that only 6 jobs per hour arrive, hence the flow rate is determined by the demand here. Is only 6 jobs per hour. Right? It's totally underutilized. And the takt time is therefore determined by the arrival rate. All makes sense? It's also a good opportunity to recap the throughput time, because it's a more complex situation. We call the throughput time is where we follow the job to the system, and we were wondering how long does it take to complete that job. I'm doing it here because now we have setup times and stuff like that, and that might also happen in real life, obviously. So if we want to determine the throughput time, so from start to departure, then basically we say that the setup times are included in that, because otherwise we can simply not complete the job. But we can just pick here one of the two lines, whatever goes fastest. And so we would say here the 6 jobs take indeed the 6 minutes plus the thing, that's 40 minutes. And here we go to the upper lane because that goes faster. So again, because it's a batch, we do that 6 times, and then we have a throughput time of 100 minutes per batch. Of course, there's some assumptions here. The assumption here is that the setup time is included, and the other assumption is that you cannot split the batch. You cannot say, I do 3 here and 3 here, which is the usual assumption in this kind of efforts. Okay, time for a review question. Review questions are old exam questions that were once at the exam, so we can practice already a little bit with a simple one. We have a process here where jobs arrive and either go to the upper lane or the lower lane, then are here in the inventory, then up or down again. So you can choose, and then the final one. And we are wondering, what is the capacity of this particular system? How many jobs per hour can we handle?
No.
12 over here. Incorrect. 10? Also incorrect.
20.
20. Who bids more on 20? No, 20 is still correct. Okay, let's see a little bit. We have 3 phases in this process. The final phase is the simplest one, has a capacity of 25 units per hour, so that's easy. The second one has 14 plus 6 because it's parallel lines, so we can add them up. That's 20. And the first one is a bit complex. We have an upper lane here with a bottleneck 10. So we cannot push more than 10 per hour here. And at the lower lane we have 12. 10 plus 12 is 22. 22 capacity, 20, 25, bottleneck 20. Hence 20 is the capacity. So we have a capacity
Yeah,
of
but
20.
if those 2 on the left, if you have the whole batch coming in, then on one side you can only do 6, and on the other side 14, so you lose. That doesn't matter.
No, it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
You also had a question?
Oh yeah, I couldn't follow it.
Oh, okay. I'll do it one more time. Thanks for asking. Okay, so we have three phases. The third phase is easy. 25 has the capacity. The second phase, since it's parallel processing, we can add them up. So that's 20, 14 plus 6. The third phase, the upper lane has a bottleneck of 10. Cannot push more than 10. The lower lane has a capacity of 12. Hence 10 plus 12 is 22. 22, 20, 25, 20 is the bottleneck. Okay. The bottleneck is frequently also associated to utilization. I saw utilization earlier. So here I have the same process as we studied before this one, but it's exactly the same. And here I have assumed that the number of jobs arriving is equal to the capacity of the bottleneck. So it's kind of balance the situation. Demand is equal to supply. So 4 jobs per hour arrive here. And the capacity is also 4 jobs per hour. And we are now wondering to which extent are the resources actually utilized. And we see here that we have a capacity of 5, but we only utilize it for 4. So we have a utilization of 80%, here 4 out of 6, 2/3, here 4 out of 4, 100%, and here 4 out of 10, 10%. So the utilization is driven by the bottleneck. Said differently, only the bottleneck is to be fully utilized. Everything else, by nature, is underutilized. So if tomorrow you're drinking coffee and your boss comes around and say, "Are you drinking coffee again?" You might say, "Yes, but I'm not the bottleneck in this process, so I have all the time in the world," right? How to put this idea to your advantage. Okay, so only the bottleneck is to be fully utilized. This can also be seen from the Gantt chart. You would be familiar with this idea, what a Gantt chart is. So basically what we are doing in the Gantt chart, we follow in time how the jobs flow through the process. And so we have 4 activities associated with 4 resources. So resource 1 is associated to activity 1, up to resource 4 to activity 4. And then the first job arrives, for me, my imagination, the yellow job arrives. So the yellow job comes here, spends 12 minutes on the first resource, 12 minutes, and then moves on to the second. So the yellow job moves on 10 minutes, then 50 minutes, then another 6 minutes, and then done. It leaves the system. In the meantime, the green job arrives. See here that there's a little white space here, idle time. Why don't we start immediately with the green job? Why is there a gap of 3 minutes here?
Otherwise, it doesn't fit. So you could start earlier, but it doesn't matter because in the third process, you don't have any other space. So you can start earlier, but you would still have to wait.
Yeah, you can start earlier, but then there would be kind of waiting time here. But actually, we cannot start earlier. Yeah, the inter-arrival time is 15 minutes. What does it mean? That each job arrives after 15 minutes. So we have 12 minutes and then 3 minutes of waiting before the next job arrives. And why is that the case? Inter-arrival time of 15 minutes. Well, that has, of course, everything to do with our bottleneck. So it's the same idea, but that's why the inter-arrival time is 15 minutes. So that once we start a job, we can immediately process it without any queuing. Also here we can see the utilization. So the first resource indeed does have some idle time every now and then, hence is not fully utilized. And that of course is necessary. And only the bottleneck, this one, is fully utilized. That is after a startup period. And that's basically what we frequently discard. So the whole startup, we discard, we only look at the thing at stable state. So indeed, the bottleneck is fully utilized. Another interesting feature of a process is the number of jobs that we actually have in the process. It's known as a work in process. So how many jobs are at any given moment in time in our process? Why would we be interested in that? Number of jobs in the process. It might be in the project organizations, that is how many projects are we working at the same time? Why is that of interest?
People, number of people.
Yeah, number of people. Basically working capital frequently, right? And the more you have in process, probably the longer it will take. It's kind of related. Okay, I will come to that in a second. So, but basically the number of jobs in the process here, again, this is the same picture as we had here. We start with one job in the process, namely the yellow one, and then we have two in the process, the green one and the yellow one, and then we have three, the red, the green, and the yellow one. Then the yellow one is out, we only have two, then the blue one comes in, we have three again. So you see here that we have up to 3 jobs in this process. So if you are analyzing this, then we have some startup period, but after that, we mostly have 3, but every now and then we have 2 on average. That is 2.87. Well, that's a bit of a tedious way to calculate all of this. So is that not a better way? Yeah. This one?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So in the first part, there is one job. Why it is not two? Because one is finished, the second one has started. Is this why? The ongoing process is one.
Okay. The yellow one is one job, right?
Yeah.
And so here at this period, we only have the yellow job. So we only have one. Yeah, it's first on the first machine and then on the second machine. Yeah, it's only the yellow. And here we have the green and the yellow. That's 2. Okay, thanks for asking. Okay, so we have a number of jobs, a bit of a tedious calculation. Can we not do that easier? If I ask the question, obviously the answer is yes, we can do that easier. And that is by the famous Little's Law. And basically what Little's Law says is that there is a connection between the number of jobs in the system, the arrival rate, so how many jobs arrive, and the throughput time. So it's actually not so much a law as an equation, some people claim, but basically these are connected. Now to look at this for the same process that we had before, the arrival rate is 4 jobs per hour. That is therefore the lambda. The throughput time is the time we spent on all the things together, which is 43 minutes. And therefore the average number of jobs can be just calculated from this equation, and that is 2.87. So without doing all the Gantt charting, you can actually calculate. Let's see another law. Okay, time for a exercise, a review question. Old exam question. Comes a bit from Saturday morning teaching, I think. It's croissant manufacturing. So this is the process of making croissants, and all the processing times are here for a batch of 50 croissants. There's no setup time, but just the processing time of making 50 croissants. So first we have some mixing and proofing and roll and cutting, and simultaneously we can do the mix filling, and here they are assembled in the filled and fold, and they go into the oven, then they are packed, and then they're done. Okay, the first question is, what is the throughput time? The throughput time of a batch of 50 croissants. How long does it take? Already heard the answer? 1 hour. 60 minutes. 1 hour. Why is that? Well, these two things can be done in parallel, so we have to look at the longest one. The longer one, obviously, the upper one. So it's 5 plus 15 plus 5 is 25. Then we move here, 30. Another 20 is 50. Plus that, 60 minutes, 1 hour. So the throughput time of a batch is an hour. The next question is, what is the capacity of this process? How many croissants can we make per hour? How many croissants can we make per hour? It's a silly question, right?
Yeah.
I just said that the throughput time was 60 minutes, so we can make 50 per hour. No, that's wrong. The capacity is not 50, it's actually much more than that. Okay, let me try to explain it a little bit because this is against. We just determined that in order to make a batch, it takes an hour. And now I'm wondering what's the capacity of this process? 50 per hour, right? No, that's wrong. Why is that wrong? Well, we can look again here. Of course, this is of a different system, but we can, okay, we make a batch that takes an hour. And then the next one would also take an hour, but that's not the case. We don't start here at this moment. In the meantime, we could have started the next batch already. We can do parallel processing. We don't have to wait until a batch is completed to start a new one. We can work in parallel. Hence, we can do more than 50 per hour. So each job does take an hour, but we can do multiple jobs per hour.
But it depends on how many workers or machines are, right?
So 150.
True, but here the key assumption is with each of the yellow boxes, we have one resource.
Different research.
Yeah, so they're all different resources. So one is doing the mixing, the other one is doing the proving, the third one the roll and cut, etc.
150.
150, correct. How did you determine that?
It's 50 per batch, and the longest time is 20 minutes,
Very
which goes 3 times an hour.
Okay, so I already said it, but never forget it again. As soon as I ask capacity, you should think bottleneck. Where is the bottleneck in this process? Right? Because the bottleneck is determining capacity of the entire process. And the bottleneck is obviously the one that takes the longest processing time, which is indeed the bake, the oven. And it takes 20 minutes, so it can be used 3 times per hour. Hence 3 batches of 50, 150. Okay, so one is the throughput time. It's always an hour. For each job it is an hour, but we can work on multiple jobs at the same time. And the capacity is determined by the bottleneck, something totally different. One is following a job, the other one is looking at the resources. Different thing.
But even with like first 2 rolls with parallel, that would take 15 minutes because the bottleneck
This one.
is 15. Right?
The upper one takes 25, that's what you're saying. Okay, if these 3 would be one box, so that would be one resource doing it, then of course it would take 25 minutes, then that would be the bottleneck. But again, the key assumption here is that each box is associated to a single resource. Okay, to carry on with that a little bit, there's another review question here, again an old exam question. It's on the Amsterdam Business School hair salon, especially for the ladies in the room. A hair salon, and there in this hair salon we have 5 activities being performed. So we receive our guests, and we do that with homemade herb tea. That means then we wash and condition the hair. Then we have a neck, shoulder, back stress release massage. I always think I come for a haircut here, but this is the spa kind of feeling that we have. Then we do the hair, obviously, and then we check out the cast. And then in order to do these activities, we have 3 resources, 3 ladies. And please, Anna, Britt, and Christine, and they have sat together and decided who would do what. And it is decided that Anna does 51, Britt does 2 and 3, and Christine does 4 and 5. So things look like this. We have 5 activities split up between Anna, Britt, and Christine in this way. Okay, the first remark here, the bullet says that the throughput time is 60 minutes. Is that correct? We follow a customer, we just add all the things, that's an hour. So, cycle time is 30 minutes. What's the cycle time? Is actually the takt time. Who's the bottleneck here?
Christine.
Christine. She takes the longest, so Christine is the bottleneck, and so the takt time or cycle time is the time that the bottlenecks take is 30 minutes. How many customers can we actually handle here? Well, 2 per hour, right?
Yeah.
Because the bottleneck takes 30 minutes, so we can do 2 per hour, and then we can calculate that to the number per week. And there's also utilization here that Anna has utilized 33% because each half hour she spends only 10 minutes. And Brit, for each half hour, she spends 20 minutes, and Christine each hour that spends actually each half hour spends so 100. So this is the way it's divided, and now the business is booming for this hair salon. So more and more customers get there, and so they're wondering how to cope with that. And they say, let's hire a new employee called Danielle, and Danielle will help out any of these three ladies. Could you help Anna, Brit, or Christine? Well, Christine, obviously, because if we want to increase our capacity, then it doesn't make any sense to help lazy Anna, because she's already has time planning. So we will put her next to Christine. So if we add capacity, we add it to the bottleneck, so we get to this situation. Okay, in this situation, what is now the capacity? How many customers per hour? 4?
3.
No, 3. 3 is the correct answer. Okay, how many can Anna handle? 6. Brit can handle 3 per hour. Ah, there you go, 3. Christine can do 2. Danielle can do 2. 2 plus 2 is 4. So 4 here, 3 here, 6 here. Bottleneck, Brit. We can handle now 3 customers per hour. But we might also wonder, well, while we have Danielle, maybe this is a time to reorganize the whole thing and say, can we not have a different? Fire Anna. Can we shift the task a little bit? Firing is not very nice, so let's keep Anna around, but can we not divide the task? And one way of doing it is this way. So now Anna does 1, 2, and 3, and so does Brit. Christine and Danielle did what we already thought before. What is now the capacity? How many customers can we have?
2 per hour.
4 per hour, right? Anna can do 2 per hour, so can Brit, so together 4, and here already saw 2 and 2, so 4, 4, everything. And that's actually the maximum that we get out of this. We can redistribute it in 100 different ways, but 4 is really the maximum. How do we know? Why can it never be higher than 4? Well, basically because everybody is fully utilized now. There's no spare capacity left. There is a simpler alternative. What would it be? How could we also organize this?
Everyone does everything.
Yeah, everybody doing it from start to finish,
Yeah.
right? Everybody doing 1 to 5, and everybody spends an hour on a customer. And since we're doing this in 4 parallel lines, we have also 4 customers per hour. That's obviously the normal way of doing it, unless you have some restrictions in terms of what people can do. Okay, so this is a very simple way of looking at it. Okay, I think that's a good time for a break. We have 20 minutes break. And then we start again at 10 minutes past 8.
Ja, dat wel, maar ook van de theorie er pakken en dan stukjes niet gebruiken. Ja, en referentie naar de.
Ja, maar jij hebt er nog wel gedaan voor je werk natuurlijk.
Ja, nee, ik het dan op. Ja, niet aan.
Nee, ik heb gewoon niet gedaan.
That's 40 and 3, 5, 50. Yeah, that's how you calculate it. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and because this is the bottleneck, that when 16 or 65 by click.
Alright.
Yeah. Yeah. Sometimes they are just what happens?
No, I think he said he trusts everyone to do the job. We just,
No, but then he
he can check it online later.
I heard that I was not here last week. You need to create an account.
I heard from someone.
Nothing to do.
No, I didn't think so. But whether or not they still
Yeah,
need
he
to do
wants
it.
to. Because it's like assignment on my own.
Yeah, he said that first, and then at the end of the class, he said, "Okay, this is a bit impractical, and I need to see whether you've done it or not."
Yeah, that's also how I remember because he said he wanted us to repeat the whole thing. He wanted evidence of each attempt, but then he said it's okay. I can already see if you did one or not. Because you can see actually.
What I understood.
He just said like you guys should do it every time.
But we still need to do it because we haven't even done it once. So.
I think we did what we have to do. Because like you're
Yeah.
trying to do the whole PDF, but that's like
We only have to do this bit. We created a virtual machine, but from there there's I have no idea what else we did.
but we were meant to do it, I guess.
No.
That's what I remember. We can check in the beginning of the last session. We can also show you. Did you check the
We did.
No, we'll look at them on the web.
We were all over email.
We'll look at the
Okay, good. We'll
Yeah,
check it.
cool.
we'll let you know. Probably won't. Yeah.
Openbare communicatie.
Ja, ja, op zich wel positief. We zijn echt bezig met een soort van reorganisatie. En nu hebben we een sollicitatiegesprek gehad. En dan een paar van krijg ik gewoon ook andere functies. Dus positief. Ja, zeker.
Zijn er actief mee bezig inmiddels.
Ja, dat is wel fijn om te zien.
Ja, dan moeten we nou nog jouw taak overnemen, zodat jij...
Want die taken die blijven allemaal voor je liggen. Dat kan niet. Dus het is ook wel logisch dat het zo gaat. Het is een kleine organisatie.
Ja.
Maar ja, ik heb wel jouw advies opgevolgd. Ik ben wel nog een keer erover in gesprek gegaan. Ik heb wel gezegd van jou, ik ga gewoon verder kijken als het niet snel genoeg
Ja.
komt. Ik zou er niet van doen. Niks te doen, maar goed.
Nee, maar ja, laat je houden. Ja.
En dat heeft ook wel geholpen. En als feedback dat ze het snappen. En dat ik niet ongeduldig moet zijn, maar dat ze ermee bezig waren.
Ja.
En toen hebben ze inderdaad weer een boekje open gedaan over wat de status was.
Lekker vaak blijven draaien. Dat is echt een oude.
Ja.
Als in ieder geval gaan ze bewegen. Dat is een soort van misschien zijn. Die drie is dat gewoon afkomen fase, dus nog steeds.
Alles is ongoing. Nog steeds. Ja, dat is dan wel minder, maar ja, dat is eigenlijk prima. Dan heb je gewoon wat meer opties.
Ja.
Opties open houden, altijd goed denk ik.
Ja, klopt. Ik moet wel in richting wat ze willen. Ja, ik ben blij mee.
Ja, dat sowieso. Dat is ook waardevol.
Van er dichtbij, direct voor veel dichtbij.
Ja, 10 minuten. Ja, dus alles is eigenlijk ideaal. Alleen, ja, ik hou er gewoon niet van een groot gedeelte van mijn werk. Ja, ik wilde gewoon echt meer uitdagingen, meer andere projecten. Maar er was gewoon geen ruimte voor. Weinig mensen. Dus dat was eigenlijk mijn enige nadeel.
Maar er komt er iemand. En dan?
Twee.
Dan gaan ze dan, hoe gaan ze aan andere projecten?
Ja, daar zit nu dus al een inwerkperiode. Maar het wordt niet helemaal duidelijk of ik daar hulp van heb, maar dat komt van anders. Dus waarschijnlijk gaan we dit gewoon meteen laten maken. Ja. Ja. En ik ook wel fijn.
Als het eenmaal geregeld is.
Ja, want ik vraag me af hoe lang het nog gaat duren. Het is wel fijn dat ze er in ieder geval mee bezig zijn.
Maar zijn ze allemaal weer?
Ja, ik heb, even kijken, wanneer moet ik dat aangeven? Begin december of zo? Maar niet. Ja, toen is het een beetje weer wel gegaan. Maar in januari, was het, ja, was eigenlijk wel duidelijk dat we nu gingen zoeken naar die mensen. Toen is het factures eruit gegaan. Nu zijn er gesprekken geweest. Hoe dat, we willen wel, dat vind ik wel echt leuk. Dus dat met 2 managers zijn wel echt bezig met een goed team neerzetten. Dus het is niet zo dat ze nu.
Nee, 400 stapelen.
Nee, omdat ik zo zit.
Ja, precies. Ja.
Nee.
Ja, we zitten gisteren er een oplossing. Als die persoon binnen een week weg is, kun je wel raden wat er gaat gebeuren.
Precies, dat wil ik wel niet op terug.
Ja.
Hoe is het bij jou?
Ja, druk.
Ja.
Het is veel worden.
Ja?
En dan lang.
Ja,
Zullen we met alles een beetje los te komen binnen de organisatie. Als ik de enige ben die dingen kan oplossen, dan
Mhm. Je hebt wel.
Nou, ik vind het vorm te krijgen.
Ik ben echt. Ik was stom, hè. Ik dacht van oké, ik vind het leuk. Ik ga het gewoon echt zelf in elkaar zetten. Maar serieus, weet je hoe lang ik bezig ben met die datafederatie? Het kost echt zoveel tijd.
Ja.
Nou, die wel ingepast.
Ja, het scheelt dat het niet langskwam wat ook echt relevant is. En,
Ja, bij mij ook, maar dan nog.
nee, klopt, maar het hoeft niet zo. Ja, het is nou de eerste keer dat ze. Zeg maar, we gaan een soort van sportstrategie geven. Ze noemen het een sportstrategie.
Ja.
Bij degene die de transportplanning doet. Normaal gesproken krijgt hij, scrolt hij gewoon een lijstje door, Excel. Maar nu gaan we dat dus op een kaart zetten. Vrij simpel. Ja. In ieder geval een goede stap. Maar ja, daar komt dit natuurlijk wel mooi voor gebruiken. Ik zie nog gebruiken ClickView van direct content van Tableau. Maar goed, ik dus een Tableau licentie. Dus ik heb het gewoon allemaal in, de data was eigenlijk al zo goed op elkaar. Dus ik heb het gewoon in Tableau gebeurd en gewoon een simpel modelletje van gemaakt. Dus dat wordt echt gebruikt. Maar ik had zoiets van, ja, je kan nu al voor dit vak al extreem ingewikkelde dingen. Ik hou gewoon simpel als dit. Ik beschrijf in ieder geval wat de bedoeling is voor de eindgebruiker. Ik had meestal opzet gemaakt, maar dat is dan een soort van ingewikkeld geworden. Dus dat was in een draft versie, dus ik had zoiets van, nou weet je wat. Dan maak je het eindverslag ook gewoon zoals het nu is.
Maar dat vind ik eigenlijk dus wel leuk, want ik merk het ook bij mij. Je kan de eerste 3 pagina's is echt zo gereduceerd naar een fractie daarvan. Maar dat is toch echt, dat is ook een onderdeel van het proces.
Nee, dat is tweeledig. Dus ja, je wil inzicht creëren door een kaart te maken, maar je moet die gebruikers ook in eerste instantie helpen hoe ze nou mee omgaan. Ja, ik wil het ook niet tegenwoordig, maar het zal wel een aantal wijzigingen die ze graag willen. Dan denk ik, ja.
Vanuit de docent?
Nee, vanuit de gebruiker zelf. Dan denk ik, ja, is
nee.
Nu hebben we nog een klein gedeelte in zeggen, maar als je straks alles erin kleuren, dan kun je het verschil niet zien. Gaan ze pas zien als het ook daadwerkelijk gebeurt. Dus pas het maar aan. Ik stel niet zo heel veel voor. Ik doe het gewoon als het verslag ook gewoon.
Maar wel fijn dat je het zegt, gewoon echt van je werk maken. Dat is leuk.
Maakt het wel leuk en ook wel makkelijker te schrijven. Ik zie het sommige anderen wel goed concentreren om
iets heb ik lastig vinden.
Dus het scheelt allemaal, ja, dat leadership programma moet je nog even doorheen.
Zit ook dit niet van? I know. Dat staat ook echt halverwege ergens. Ik moet zoeken hoeveel woorden je eigenlijk
Nee, maar het was afgelopen vrijdag hier in Alsace.
Oh ja, want dan door de sneeuw.
Dat is het echt niet te doen. Ik had zoiets van, ja, gewoon vorige week gewoon even hele 3000 woorden eruit. We spreken het concept gewoon vrij met een paar een beetje
Ik heb volgende week niet gedaan.
Oké, nou mooi. Dus dat heb je.
Normaal zin maken. Dus dan
ja. Mooi. Ja, leuk. Ik vind allebei wel. Ik vind het echt heel leuk. En gewoon logisch. Maar wel handig.
Dat grappig is, ik heb bij een bedrijf gewerkt dat is die is toch ingewikkelder dan kaartjes die er zo uit waarde houden te berekenen.
Nee, je hebt te maken met mensen.
Ja. Ja, dat ook. Maar het is wel gewoon leuk om inderdaad te maar met het andere vak.
Ja, we hadden eigenlijk de hele les van het andere. Maar ik werk zelf met Amazon met mijn werk, dus het is
easier dan de.
Ja, dat is wel handig. Maar het zal vanaf volgende week wel anders zijn. Met die andere platforms totaal niet. En hij zegt dat deze de meest bruikbare of handzaam is. Dus die andere platforms ken ik, of clouds ken ik helemaal niet. Was het niet bij jou een beetje goed?
Nou, ik was het nog goed.
Oh, nee.
Ik moet even kijken hoe het komt.
Nou, als je wil werken.
Ja.
Dus in de handleiding staat geloof ik wel duidelijk. Alleen, ik weet niet of je een Mac of Windows. Dan moet je een programma te downloaden voor het verkrijgen van die team. Maar ik weet niet zeker of dat een naam is. Het ziet er meer uit als de slides. Nou, ik was met het spreekt weet ik het niet. Staat er bij stap. Dit één. Nee, maar ik heb ook nog coaching in. Dus, ja, ik was gisteren naar de inzage. En in principe was nee, nee, afsluiten. Maar ik dacht van een mooie winter. Ik weet niet, is ook niet echt wat ik verwachten. Maar daar in principe, ik had eigenlijk voor alle vragen wel gewoon punten. Alleen niet volledig of niet. Het is gewoon zonde. Ook stomme fouten, dat ik dacht, waarom? Als ik er nu nog een keer kom. Dus ik heb wel goede. Het is niet zo dat ik denk van als je doet, dat het niet gewoon volledig gegeven. Dus ik ga nog een keer goed op tentamen bekijken van het model. En begrijpen wat hij volledig wil. Dus.
Heb je er allemaal?
Ja. Nou, ik denk dat die het gewoon net gelijk houdt. Ik kan me niet voorstellen dat die er niet zijn.
Ik heb het volgende jaar wel doen.
Ja. Daarom bouwen we ook echt helemaal. Aan de andere kant, ja, precies. Maar dan was zo niet in. Maar dat is ook wel heel erg.
Nou, zeg het weer niet weer.
Het enige wat ik jammer vind
Dan kan het goed. Dat jij, ik keek even op mijn lijstje voor het CAS-event.
Oh, dat?
Voor het CAS-event. En daar zag ik jouw naam niet bij staan.
Bier drinken, ja.
Ja. En ik weet dat jij houdt van bier drinken. Ja. Dus ik was helemaal perplex.
Ja, nee, normaal gesproken ben ik er wel erg voor. Maar ja, dat is een bezaking.
Ja.
En daar zit ik gewoon thuis vol. Daar kom ik gewoon niet weg.
Ja, het is, je ziet die, weet het niet.
Misschien dat ik...
Dat is lekker.
Jawel.
Ja, vanaf. Ja, dat is zo'n bieber dat je...
Maar ik weet gewoon nu
nou ja,
al
je ziet nog steeds wel gewoon die man.
Ja. Dat gaat me gewoon niet lukken.
Mag je even bijhouden?
Precies, dat
oh ja, precies. Zo naast houden. Elke keer zo opslaan.
Kijk hoe... maar...
Ja,
toen zeg ik ook gewoon.
Nee, maar dan weet ik dat je het
ja, nee, ik heb het
niet
gezien
over
en ik vond het top, maar...
Gaat dit een vaste ontwikkeling worden? Gewoon,
helaas.
Alleen niet voor carnaval even.
Nou, ik had het vorige week ook al, maar op zich werkt het wel aardig.
Ja, dat is ideaal.
Dus ik ben nu een beetje aan het experimenteren ermee. En ja, ik heb nu zo'n broadcast software ook. Maar ja, dan kan ik misschien straks wel trainingen verkopen op Udemy of zo. Dat lijkt me wel grappig. Ja. Dus ik gebruik jullie gewoon als testsubject.
Als je een referentie nodig hebt. Als je een referentie nodig
hebt. Oh ja. Good shit. Maar had jij hem al helemaal gedaan? De opdracht.
Ik heb met jou meegekozen. En toen kreeg ze mijn computer en toen dacht ik, fuck it. Ik kijk hem gewoon af. En dan,
ja, precies. Okay.
Ja, ik heb wel stukjes en wel geprobeerd. Ik heb een account aangemaakt en voor mij doen we al heel wat.
Oké. We're going to continue with the stochastic part of process analysis. And the underlying idea was that in process analysis we have so far taken all numbers as a fixed number. Let's say if the inter-arrival time was 5 minutes, then we assumed it always to be exactly 5 minutes. Like clockwork, people come in. And when the processing time was 12 minutes, we always assumed that it was exactly 12 minutes. And already we distinguished that that is not very realistic. It's easy to calculate with those numbers, but it might not be realistic. It might be that people come in with an average of 5 every 5 minutes, but sometimes it's 4 minutes, sometimes it's 6, and it averaged out at some point. And the same holds for the processing times, you might say, about 12 minutes on average. And the part that most people who are not into operations and supply chain take, well, if I just take the average, then everything will out smoothly and it will all average out. And unfortunately, that is not true for operations. As soon as the stochastics kick in, things get pretty awful. And so I'm going to explain what is the underlying reason for that, and to give a big warning that in operations, things don't average out, that you really have to look at these uncertainties or variability, as I will call it. Now, the underlying ideas of that all come from so-called queuing theory. Queuing theory is a part of operations research, and I studied it quite a lot during my studies, but later on in my life, I started to hate queuing theory. It had nothing to do with queuing theory itself, but it had to do with my real life experience. Because when my kids were a little bit smaller, unfortunately they are now old enough, but when they were a little bit smaller, especially my daughter, they really like all these amusement parks. The Efteling, Six Flags, Euro Disney, you name it. They always wanted to go there, and I didn't like that too much, but I love my children, so you have to take them there. And of course, when we went there, it was only on vacation days when it was sunny. And you can imagine what happens then. Queuing all the time. And so I was constantly in the queue. I think what I'm doing here, and I started thinking about queuing theory. And that totally wasted my appetite for the whole queuing theory. But the queuing theory is basically looking at, from a mathematical perspective, to a trade-off. And that's what, of course, what we are going to do from a managerial perspective. We're looking at a trade-off between service or actually speed. How long does it take for a customer to go through the entire process? Or in queuing time, what is the total time in the queue, or what is the length of the queue? The longer the queue is, the longer it takes before you're finally processed. And of course, the cost in terms of capacity. Because when I was at Efteling, I always thought, well, they have, 15, 20 attractions or something like that. Why don't they have 50 attractions? Because if they have 50 attractions, then the queues would be much shorter. That seems like a good idea to me as a customer. But of course, from a Efteling point of view, if you have 50 attractions, then half of the year they are totally empty. So there's a clear trade-off here, and so that's basically what we are studying. So we don't look too much at the mathematics. We'll see some mathematics, but it's the underlying idea that I like to get into. How exactly do these trade-offs work? Now, in order to analyze that a little bit, I've put all my creativity that I have in PowerPoint. This is the best I can do. The underlying idea is that we have a so-called, what they call a calling population. They're basically people that are roaming around in a Euro Disney, and then they decide for an attraction. So they go to the queue, and then finally they go to a server, a roller coaster or something. So they are being served, and then finally they leave sick. The entire premises. So that's the way it goes, and so we translate that into a process in our symbols that we have seen before. It's actually pretty simple. The process consists of one queue and a server, and we are basically studying how the queue behaves when people arrive here and we have certain capacities, and when there is some fluctuations there, some variability, as we call it. And the variability can actually only be in two things. The number of people arriving here, it can be a constant or it can be wildly fluctuating, and the time that the server takes. It can be a fixed amount or it can be wildly fluctuating. One of the interesting assumptions in queuing theory is that on average, the number of people arriving here is lower than the capacity. On average, the number of people arriving here is lower than the capacity. That's an awkward assumption. Because what is your first thought?
Why is there a queue?
Yeah, if there are less people arriving than we have capacity, why is there a queue at all? And the queue is only due to variability. And to imagine that a little bit, we can take coffee machines here, for instance. On average, the coffee machine is available for more than enough. The capacity is high enough. But once the class all goes together to the coffee machine, we have a queue. And so the queue is not there because the average capacity is not enough. It's more than enough. But because of the arrivals don't come one by one. It's not like clockwork. We come in groups, and then for hours nothing is there, and then there are even larger group, and again we are queuing. And so that's basically the reason for the queues is not the average, it is the variability. That's what we are studying. Obviously, when you have a capacity that is lower than the number of arrivals, you also have a queue, but that's not what we are studying in queuing theory. Queuing theory, they are only looking at the queues due to fluctuation, to variability, to that the fact that things are not in a constant. Now, of course, in order to come up with formulas, we need all kinds of parameters, and I'm not going to read this out because that's more confusing than you would say. Typically, we can have multiple servers in parallel, where we have one queue and multiple servers, but I'm even not going to bother about that. I immediately fast forward to the famous Kingman's formula, which explains the average waiting time spent in the queue. So if you're a customer, how long do you spend in the queue? That's determined by this Kingman's formula, the approximate formula. And the upper one is if you have multiple servers, if you have more than one. I just put it there to impress you. So, whoa, that is a pretty neat formula. Looks nice. But when there is only one server, so here we have multiple servers, but if there's only one, things are a little bit easier, and we get to this formula. That's the one I like to explain. It's called the VUT formula. The V stands for variability, the U stands for utilization, and the T stands for time. And the TE here is the time that the server takes. TAs and TEs. And so the E stands for the time that the server takes, the average time the server takes. The C's here stand for variability. If you really want to know what variability is, it stands here. The coefficient of variation, C, that is a relative measure of variability. That's nothing else than the average, or the standard deviation divided by the average. And so the standard deviation is a measure of dispersion, of variability. And so the larger the C's come, the more variability there is in the system. So large C's means a lot of variability, low C's means not so much variability, not so much uncertainty or strange. And here you see the A for the arrivals, the variability in the arrivals, and the E for the variability in the server time. Now, if these variabilities would be 0, if there was 0 variability, how large would the queues be? Right, you immediately see that, right? If this is 0, this is 0, then the whole thing drops. Then the whole queue length is 0. Well, why is that? Because we have sufficient capacity. So this also tells us again the story that the variability is the one causing you. No variability, no queues. There is variability, there are queues. And you also see that it's quadratic here. So the larger these C's become, the more these queues will start to grow. So the variability does matter. So the more variability they have, the more. The second component is even more important. That is the U stands for the average utilization. So on average, how much is a server utilized? You see a very strange term here. We have U over 1 minus U.
It's the rate of how much it's utilized.
Sorry?
It's how much it's utilized.
Yeah, how much it's utilized. Yeah. So is our server 50% utilized, 80% utilized, 90% utilized? On average, that is, right? During the day. It's always lower than 100% because that is the assumption. So we have some utilization rate. You see here how that is. Let's assume that the utilization rate is 50% on average. How large is this term? 50% over 1 minus 50% is 50% over 50% is 1. Let's assume this is 99%. Utilization 99%. How large is this term? 99, right? 99% over 1%, 99%. So the closer that the utilization gets to 1, the higher we are utilized, the larger this term becomes. So the waiting time does depend on variability. The more variability, the longer the waiting time. And it does depend on the utilization. The higher the utilization, the higher our queue length will be. This is the phenomenon that we are having. Okay, just to make it come alive a little bit, I have here a very simple case. So we have an inter-arrival time on average of 60 seconds. So every 60 seconds a job comes in on average. And we have a server time of 58 seconds. And here we assume that everything is like clockwork, no variability at all. So every 60 seconds a job comes in and we spend exactly 58 seconds. Our utilization is, let's say, 97%, right? On average. How long is our queue? Well, nothing, because we don't have any variability. Job comes in, and then we are 2 seconds idle, and then we have to work for 58 seconds, 2 seconds idle, and we work again. So we are highly utilized, but there's no queue whatsoever. Okay, here I changed one thing from here to here. So from this slide to the next one, I changed one thing, that the variability of the arrivals only is now given by 1. So there is variability there, but for the server it's still 0. And I've just entered it everything in the formula. So I just used the formula and entered all the numbers. And we come to an average waiting time of 14 minutes. Okay, wait a minute. How can that be? Here's nothing, and here's 14 minutes. How come? What's the difference? There's only one difference, and that is the variability. Variability is causing this to happen. Okay, if we start looking at that, you can forget all the formulas. This is the important graph. It says in your slides more for variation, but it should be variability. It's better terms. I want to change that bit. More variation. Okay, this is an important figure. This one you should never forget. If you remember one thing of today's class, this one is the one you should remember. On this axis, we have the utilization of our resource on average. On this, we have the waiting time, so the speed, so to speak. So this is the trade-off curve that we are studying here. Now, you see here that the waiting time is pretty minimal, up to 50, 60, almost 70%. And then the queues start growing. But it doesn't grow linearly, it grows almost exponentially. It really is asymptotic behavior. They go like, whoa, here you hardly have any queue, a little bit further, the queue goes way up. And the more variability you have, the earlier this happens. This is a very strange phenomenon, because it tells us that the combination of high variability and high utilization, so if you have both high variability and high utilization in operations and supply chain, that's a cocktail for disaster. High utilization and high variability is really very bad for your system, because your queuing time will explode. If you only have high variability, but your utilization is minimal, not so much a problem. If you have only high utilization, but you have zero variability, no problem whatsoever. If you have high variability and high utilization, then you are really in trouble. So otherwise, variability is a killer for your efficiencies. Variability will kill your efficiencies. Very important message. It doesn't average out. There is a really strange thing. Actually, we can witness this almost every day in the traffic, whether you go by train or by car. If one little thing happens in the traffic, then the queues, the traffic jams will explode. A little bit of rain. Oh, what's happening? If we have a little bit first, is there variability in traffic? Yeah, everybody going different direction. Everybody has different speed. Everybody, we have trucks, and we have personal cars, and we have old ladies driving slow, and we have fast people like ourselves. There's a lot of variability there. So a lot of variability, and so when is the utilization really high? Of course, in traffic hours. And so if we have a little bit of rain during traffic hours, what happens? Well, everybody's slowing down just a little bit. Hence, the capacity is even higher, and there the traffic jams go. A little bit of snow, whoa, there we go. It's just very sensitive. One accident on the wrong place, the whole country comes to a standstill. But it's because of this very sensitive area that we are in. If an accident happens on Sunday morning or it snows in the weekends, there's not much of a problem because we don't have a lot of utilization there. It only happens at the combination of high utilization and high variability. So that is really to hammer this message down. I have yet another example of how this works. A little bit of stylized example, invented by myself, so to speak, but just to see how the dynamics go in a process. Okay, so try to follow me here a little bit. So here I have a process. It starts here with raw materials, and then I have activities here, and the idea here is that 3 units of raw material arrive here. Then I have a capacity here of handling 3 units per hour. Here a capacity of 3 units per hour, here 3 units per hour, etc. Here I have end products and a demand of 3 units per hour taken out. Now, if everything is fixed, it's exactly 2 units per hour, there's no variability, would this work?
Yeah.
That goes like, it's the smoothest operations that you can think of. Everything is moving 3 units per hour to the next. So that's perfect. But now I throw in a little twist, and that is that the capacities here are on average 3 units per hour still, but I make a wild fluctuation because in any given hour, the capacity might either be 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, or 6. On average, that's still 3, but it can be 6 in 1 hour and 0 in another hour, and it can randomly fluctuate wildly. It's like throwing with a dice with a 0 added to it. So if I want to know the capacity, hey, 4 this hour, 6, 8, 0. That's the way it goes. Not very realistic, but it can happen. So we still have on average 3 units per hour. And in order to not make problems too bad, I start with 6 items here, 6 items here, 6 items here, etc., so that I can cope with some fluctuation. So if you look at this and you're not warned by me, the first reaction is probably, well, it should not be too bad. It averages out. It should work perfectly, but it doesn't. So I simulated this just in a very simple Excel sheet. So I had the random number generator, and I calculated everything. And of course, you get all kinds of different outcomes. But this is a typical outcome. This is typically how it goes. But try to follow my logic here. I have simulated this for 100 hours, so I did the whole thing for 100 hours, and I was here calculating the inventories. So how much do I have in this inventory, in this inventory, in this inventory? How many items are there? And it started with 6, like you see, and I was just wondering how much items are there. So for instance, if you take this one, then of course the amount depends on how much we have processed here and how much we have processed here. Here I take items out, here I push items in, so that might fluctuate over the time. Okay, so let's try to see what all the inventories do. So the first one is the blue line. The blue line here is the raw materials inventory. It's this one. It starts at 6. The dotted line here is 6. Then you see here it grows and then it shrinks again and then kind of stabilizes there. The second one, the red line is the work in process 1. So these items, and you see here first they're exposed to 20 and then it goes down again, and then here it's very high again and then goes down again. So all kinds of strange behavior, etc., etc. So we have the green line, which is for the second work in process. The yellow line is for the third work in process. The most interesting is maybe the last one. That's this one, the black line. And here I take out items 3 every hour. That's a fixed amount. And the amount that gets in, yeah, that depends a little bit on the random activities that I have here. But I take out 3 every hour. And if they are not there, I will say there's a negative inventory. There's still items that should be delivered later. So I start at 6 and then we get a shortage. And the shortage grows and grows and grows and grows and then it stabilizes around 40. So I still have a shortage of 40 items that I can't deliver. Okay, this is strange. What is causing this? Why is not everything neatly 6? Variability. Variability is doing this. This is all caused by variability. No variability, everything would be smooth and fantastic and no problem at all. But now we have this strange behavior. If you're an operations manager of this process, how would you feel about this?
Well, depends what's going on, because it seems
doesn't
to
depend.
no, but it seems to stabilize around 40.
It stabilizes at 40. I'll come to that in a moment. But how would we feel about this? This is your worst nightmare. This is really the worst thing that you can have. Because what do we want? We always want to deliver. We want to be reliable. We are not reliable because we have a shortage of 40. And we want to keep our inventories low because high inventories do cost a lot of money. So we want to have low inventories and want to be very reliable. What are we? Not reliable at all. And we have very high inventories. Sometimes the blue, sometimes the red, sometimes the yellow. And it is, we are totally out of control.
Why does it always err towards that
Yeah.
side?
I'll come to that in a second. But the first time I'm going to say, this is your worst nightmare. You have a lot of inventory, but you can't deliver. If I have a lot of inventory, then at least I can deliver. And if I can't deliver, then at least my inventory should be low. But this is the worst of both worlds. So this is really something that you don't like. And the reason, underlying reason, is really variability. And let me try to get to the heart of this. So why doesn't it average out? How come? Why is this such a strange behavior? Why is this queuing graph so strange? In order to explain that, at least that's the way I can explain it to myself, it goes a little bit like this. So let's take any station, any of these stations, any of these activities, and any given hour. I take a station in any given hour, and so I have some inventory lying there, and I throw with my dice. It can be high or it can be low in terms of capacity. Okay, let's make 2 scenarios here. Right, can you all see that? You count. Okay, I'll give you a shot. So we have two scenarios. Scenario one is we have some inventory lying around. So that's the inventory. And we have a capacity, and I throw with my dice, and then this will be high. Let's say. That's my capacity. And that gives us the second scenario, scenario two. I have the same inventory, same amount. But unfortunately, I throw with my dice, it is a low amount. Okay, let's see what happens in these two situations. In the first scenario, I have a lot of capacity here. And what is my bottleneck? I only have this inventory that I can work on. So I take whatever inventory I have, so I use all of this, and use its capacity, and I move it on to the next station, to the next inventory. Okay. The second scenario, I don't have so much capacity. I do have a lot of inventory here, comparison-wise, so I will just use whatever capacity I have. I take that away from the inventory and move it on. Okay, so far so good. But now, the question is, what happens to this additional inventory? Where does it go? It stays there, right? So it stays in the system for the next hour to be processed. So this one is in. And what do we do with this extra capacity? It's lost. We had it in this hour, we had the capacity, but the next hour it's not there anymore. So capacity is lost. And that is the imbalance there is. Inventory always stays in the system, capacity is lost. And if you look at this system, on average, we had exactly enough capacity. If we lose, due to this randomness, every now and then a little bit of capacity, then our overall capacity is not capable to meet the demand. We have a shortage, and that's exactly what's happening. And the inventory, it stays there. So our inventory will be high, and our capacity will be too low. And indeed, it stabilizes after some time. Here, there. That's because frequently it is the case that the inventories are always higher than whatever the capacity is. If we have so much inventory in the system, then it stops, right? And this never happens anymore. So we are kind of in a stable situation. But then, of course, we have a lot of inventory in the system already, too much. Okay, so this is just to emphasize this thing, it doesn't average out. Capacity and inventory are incomparable. One stays, one goes out. So if you want to cope with this, either you have a lot of inventory, a long queue, or you have a lot of capacity, you're underutilized. Yeah, sorry, you have to choose between the two. You can't have them both. And that is in the case of variability.
Can you explain the green line at the end? Or is it just randomly?
Yeah, just randomly. Yes, I can't explain it. I just claim it to be random. So. Yeah. Okay, this brings us to what is known as the fundamental law of factory physics. I really like this. The fundamental law of factory physics. We were never even aware that there was something like factory physics, let alone a fundamental law. But it basically says that an increasing variability always degrades the performance of a production system, of a process. You can never be efficient the existence of variability. Variability kills the efficiencies of your system. The more variability you have, the higher the problem will be. There are basically, you can't do anything about it. The only choice that you're having is where do you want to put the bad stuff? You want to keep a lot of inventory? Okay, then you have a long waiting time and that's bad. You can say, I have an overcapacity, fine, but it's also costly. Or you can say, yeah, my customers just have to wait, like the people at all the amusement parks say, yeah, I'm sorry, it's busy today. No, you stand longer in the queue. That's the way it is, and we make it fun for you in the queue or whatever they try to do with that. But it's a choice between bad things, right? But you can say, okay, I put it in inventory, I put it in waiting time, I put it in capacity, whatever it is. Of course, what we can also do is to add flexibility towards the end. We can say, okay, if there is a very busy day, then I add some capacity to it, and then I cope with the fluctuations. But basically, that is not the solution. What would be the solution? So if you don't want this to happen, if you don't want the inventories and the capacity or the waiting time, minimize variability. So that brings us to the issue of variability management. That is a very much underestimated part of management at all. I've never met anybody who has a business card variability manager. Maybe you can make a business card and show it to me next time. Hey, you have variability. That would be a very, very good job in operations, variability. So what are some sources of variability? Randomness, unpredictability, volume changes, lumpy demand. What's that? Lumpy demand. Basically, the demand goes up and down wildly, like the coffee machine. The demand is zero for a long time. All of a sudden, there are 20 people there. That's lumpy demand. It fluctuates wildly. Many different products. It's typically a marketing, sales kind of thing. Let's have another type of product, and yet another type of product, and another type of product. And then the people in operations say, "Oh, don't do that because already it's very complex." Oh no, one additional product that won't kill us. Yes, it will. How come? Well, if you add just a little bit more variety, then we go into this strange behavior. Actually, I've been told by people from Lego, you know Lego, the building blocks, a very strange organization, not strange, very interesting organization. They told me in the last quarter of the year, the last 3 months of the year, how much of their total sales of the year is made in the last quarter? Any idea? That's the Christmas. How much of the? 75%. Yeah, something like that. 75% of is only in the last quarter. The 3 quarters, they only have 25% of sales, and so there's already huge fluctuation. But they said, what's to me say, no, Jacques, we have all these Lego blocks, building blocks, and if we want to add one new Lego block of another color or another other shape or whatever, it is a boardroom decision. So many blocks, adding just one more block, why should that be a boardroom decision? They say that is increasing our variability so much that we only want to do that if there is a very good trade-offs, and we have made the decision that it should be taken by the boardroom and by nobody else. Otherwise, we are just adding complexity. You will see from Lego that they have new boxes each year, from the farm or from the Star Wars or from this or from that, but it's always from the same blocks. If you want to add a block, you really should go to core. That is because of the variability management. Too much variability will kill the system, and actually it has in the past. So we have all these variabilities, and that's also a part of your first group case. The message uses PATA to see all kinds of variabilities and to see what could be done. And that's variability management. And in variability management, actually we distinguish between good variability and bad variability. And good variability is okay, and bad variability is simply bad. Don't tell me that operations is a hard course. It's very simple. We have good and bad. Good is good and bad is bad. How would we distinguish? One, do we know when something has a good variability or a bad variability? How would we be able to learn it? Now you can think for yourself. It's a matter of customer focus. If the customer wants the variability, then you can think, okay, but variability is bad for my system, but if there is enough payment, then I should probably add some flexibility in order to cope with it, and then it can be a profitable business. If the customer is not willing to pay for it, then it's just shooting yourself in the foot, making your own life miserable. Kill all the other variability. Make standard operating procedures. Not everybody just inventing their own way. Make things as standardized as possible. So it's really a very important part of operations. Okay, enough warning about this. Never forget anymore. It doesn't average out. Variability is a killer for any operation system. more variability you have, the harder it is to efficient. Okay, having said that, let's move on to additional topics. One is the process matrix associated with the layout, and the other one is the order penetration point. Okay, in the process matrix, basically we are wondering which operation is using which type of process. And here we have all kinds of different processes. We have car manufacturing and filmmaking and bakeries and writing your thesis towards the end of your program. So these are all processes, and we are just wondering, can we also map them a little bit so that we understand where to use which type of process. And for that we have the famous process matrix. What the process matrix does is basically map all the different types of processes that we are having along the diagonal in the volume variety. So this is variety, is not variability. Variability is something different. Variety is how many different items of the same product are we having. Is it the one product for everything, or can we have many different varieties? So here we have the high variety, low volume corner, and here we have the high volume, low variety corner. Neatly placed along the diagram. Okay, let me go over them. The first one is a project. I think several of you will be working in a project environment. Who's working in a project environment? Software development or something, what do you do?
Software.
Yeah, software. Other project type of organizations? Sorry? Yeah, consultancy, very much project oriented. Very good. Filmmaking, construction, frequently, all basically. What's good about project? How would we like that?
Tailor-made. Customizing.
Tailor-made, good.
Define start and end.
Yeah, define start and end. Yeah. Okay, here again, I want you to think in. What's good about it?
Flexibility.
Yeah, high flexibility. So flexibility is very high. So this is the flexibility corner, so to speak. If you want to be flexible, then probably you want to go here. You can make it tailor-made, and you can adopt it according to customer needs, whatever. What's not so here? What is less well developed?
Speed.
Yeah, speed is good. Speed and cost are pretty low frequently in that area. Right? This is the high flexibility, but also high cost kind of. Okay, this next one in line is what we call a job shop. And that was an example of a job shop.
The hospital.
You're a good guesser. Why would it's correct? The hospital is typically a job shop. Okay, what is a job shop? Job shops typically we have some more variety, but the volume per item is also high. So why is a hospital? Why would we consider that as a job shop type of environment?
On demand. So it's like an accident happens, and it just comes in. You have to address it right away.
Yeah, true. Yeah, that is true, but it is not so much why we call it. Okay, let me explain a little bit more on the job shop environment. Frequently, we can distinguish between what we call a job shop and what we call a flow shop. Everything else here is flow shop. By looking at the layout, by just looking at how the premises looks like. And the layout is typically, we distinguish between functional and layout. So we have two types of layout here. The functional layouts, which is hospital on this hand, and this is the garage, where you fix your car, so to speak. And there you have fixed stations. And the jobs move from station to station depending on the type of activity needed. But they kind of move erratically, because for each patient in the hospital, it depends on the illness that you're having to which activities you go. You don't go to all activities, you just go to the selected activities according to your need. In a flow shop, all the jobs have the same sequence of activities. They always have the same activities. So the moving assembly lines, all cars move to the same stations. And you have burger manufacturing, all the burgers are moved in the same direction. That's what we call a flow shop. So a flow shop, all the jobs have all the same activities to be performed, all in the same sequence. In a job shop, all jobs can have different activities from a selected set. In a hospital, we have doctors of this type and doctors of that type, and these are the departments that we are having here. And depending on your disease, your sickness, you move to a selected number of stations. That's what we call a job shop environment. So hospitals are typical job shops, garages are typical job shops. Everything else is what we call a flow shop. So then everything moves in the same direction. The first one we have batch. What's an example? The bakery, indeed, very good. Bakery, and my favorite here is the Mona. Mona is making desserts. They have one line for making yogurt, for instance, banana yogurt, and then on the same line they produce strawberry yogurt, and then plain yogurt, and then vanilla yogurt. The batch type of manufacturing. So they have always the same line, but they move from one batch to another. The next one in line is mash manufacturing. It's always doing the same. Heineken beer brewery, so the plain Heineken is just, have you ever been there in the brewery? It moves on mass manufacturing. And the last one is continuous. Continuous is different from everything else here. This is what we call discrete production. So we can really distinguish one job from the next. Here at continuous, we are just moving on. So paper is one example here. You cannot distinguish one piece of paper from the next. It just is moving on. What would be other examples for continuous?
Oil and gas. Oil and gas production.
Oil and gas, pretty much. All kinds of utilities, electricity, chemicals, typically in continuous. Okay, what's good about this corner? What do we like here? Standardized, yeah, but standardized very much.
Low cost.
Low cost. You can have the economies of scale. You can optimize everything. You can have all the machines and the standardized things, so you can be very efficient there. Can we also be very customized here?
No.
Not so much. Here, things are standard, you know. Want to have your Heineken beer in an orange bottle, just for fun. Can't be done. It's green bottles, that's it. Standard green bottles. Yeah, but I want a bottle of twice the size. Doesn't work. So everything is standardized here, hence low cost. So you see here them neatly organized along the diagram. And that is related to layout. So again, for layout, we say this is the functional layout because all the resources of a certain type are grouped. All the resources of a certain type are grouped, whereas in a product layout, all the resources are grouped according to the product that we are making. Okay, review question. What type of layout, the functional or the product layout, would we find in a typical supermarket?
Functional.
Functional or product layout? Functional layout, right? So how can we tell? Yeah, so we have a group of products, all bread type of products are all grouped together, all the detergents are grouped together, all the beers and sodas are grouped together, all the potato chips and everything is grouped together. These are the most important categories to me. It's actually pretty easy to find your way to shops. If you have a shopping list, coffee milk, milk products probably. Oh, not there, then probably coffee products. And so you associate it according to the category. And that's the way they have designed that. So it's really functional. Why wouldn't this work, product layout? Why doesn't it work for supermarkets? Yeah. And why is there? It's too much different types of customers, right? So if you would have customers of type A go there, type B go there, type C go there, and you would immediately know, hey, today I'm B, that might work. But of course, there are too many different categories. Hence, the only way to do it like this is too much variety. And so we go back to our matrix. Why is it there? Well, there's a lot of variety here, and you can never organize it as a flow show type of setting. You have to do it this way. Of course, there's a whole science in this supermarkets on what to put where, which shelf space to put it. And I'm always discussed it a little bit when I'm at the checkout counter and I have to wait. Hey, stroopwafels, nice. We're not on the shopping list, but you start packing all kinds of things that people notice. That's why my wife prevents me doing the shopping, I guess. So there's a whole science going into it, but basically it is a functional layout. Actually, it's pretty interesting to see how different organizations are moving along the diagonal. Like I already was mentioning earlier, I'm a lot with the construction industry, especially housing construction. And it used to be that every house was a project. So they say, oh, that's a new building, and we are building 5 houses there and 7 houses there, and always they started from scratch, so it seems. And of course, then I come in and say, hey, that doesn't seem right to me. Why don't you make that more into a efficiency? Yeah, but it's always a different environment, a different thing, and different. So it's always different. Hence, it's always a project. Nowadays, we have what we call conceptual building not at the location where you want the house, but actually building houses in a factory setting. Why would we do that? So they move it a little bit from here to there. Why would we do that?
Cheaper?
Yeah, much cheaper. Yeah, much more efficient. And there's a high housing need at the moment, as we all know, especially if you live in Amsterdam. Nightmare, and there's not enough capacity. So why don't we move here? And then, yeah, what's the downside to this? When you compare it to this? Yeah, so you can't customize. It's standardized. We have a standardized living. You have to make choices. So good time to bring in the second mini case. Narayana Hridaya Hospital. Always said it's very fast, and what did he say? I'm not going to repeat it. He said Narayana. I was really triggered by this case. I found it very interesting because it talks about a process innovation. So whenever I see process and innovation in one sentence, I'm on to, hey, process innovation, interesting. What's going on here? What is this process innovation that Narayana and Dr. Shetty is actually doing there? How would we frame this? What is the process innovation? Of course, they came out with a totally new concept, but what is this process innovation?
Our surgery is supposed to be very specific for each customer and specialized procedure.
Yeah.
And he turned it into a kind of fast, replicable process.
Yeah, he made it in. Actually, he made it into a mass product. Right? We know that hospitals are we have discussed that. Hospitals are actually job shop type of environment, and this guy Shetty in Narayana has made it into mass manufacturing for heart surgery. Is that really true? Yeah. Well, it's really true because the volume is pretty high and the variety is low, right? Actually, the title already gives it away. It says, does it say in the title? The Henry Ford of heart surgery. Okay, now we have to take Henry Ford. And what has Henry Ford to do with this? But Henry Ford was, of course, the guy who came up with the moving assembly line for making cars. And when we go back in time, it used to be that car making was into a project. They, more than 100 years ago, if you wanted a car, you went to a manufacturer and say, I want a car. And they say, yes, very nice. We're going to build one for you. Where do you want the steering wheel? On the left, on the right, in the back? You say it, everything is possible. And there was hardly any standardization at the time. Every car was a project. And then, of course, Henry Ford came along and he said, you can get any car that you like as long as it's a T Ford, and you get any color that you like as long as it's black. there's nothing to choose here. So he moved it from project to mass immediately, with very little variety, as long as black, but of course the cost was also way lower. So this guy Shetty is now the Henry Ford of heart surgery. What are the benefits to this? If you move from there to there in heart surgery, far lower cost, right? And then people say, yeah, but this is India. That has nothing to do with that. It is really because of the efficiencies of mass manufacturing. You have all the machines that you can optimally use, and all the flow lines. Everything is optimized. Everything is standardized, optimized. You get all the economies of scale. That's clear.
Less
far
use.
lower cost. Sorry?
You specificate also higher quality.
Yeah, higher quality. Yeah, much higher quality. How come? Why is it higher quality? Yeah, specialization. It's really doing this over again. That is, at least in healthcare, is a clear signal of quality. At least perceived that way. Is there also a shadow side to this? Is there also a downside? Something that say, hey, that's not so good.
Doesn't fit.
Yeah. It has very low variety. If you have a disease a little bit complex, a little bit different, you can go there. You say, I want to be treated here in your nice, efficient factory line. Sorry, we can't help you. But we are only fixed on this high volume, low variety thing. If you're outside the boundary, it simply doesn't fit. So this is a thing that we see a lot in healthcare nowadays. We call it streets. B street and eye laser street and a hernia street and all kinds of streets. And that's basically getting out of the job shop, moving to mass because that's much more efficient. What then should we do with the patients that don't fit here? They stay in a job shop environment. And so the big movement in healthcare nowadays is that all the complex patients should go to the academic hospitals where all the research is done and we have all kinds of new diseases and unknown and everything that's kind of standard, more or less, goes to all the efficient ones. So we distinguish between the two. And that is smart thinking from an operations perspective. Do not interfere between the two. Either you're here or you're there. And you can have two places, one hospital for the complex parts and one hospital for the simple diseases. That's the way to distinguish. Of course, hospitals have a very hard time understanding this, or not understanding this. The concept is very simple, but implementing this. So, actually, I'm doing this. So I go to this healthcare institutes, say, right, you have to distinguish between mass and job shop. I say, yes, that's true, but why wouldn't that work in practice?
The staff isn't trained for it.
Yeah, has to do with staff. Frequently, staff is either saying that if I'm doing the same thing all day, that's very boring. Let me be here. People who are here say, yeah, I'm heretically moving. Let me move here. I'm okay if we have both, then we can swap them, right? But then you lose some of the efficiency. So staff should make up their mind there. It's true. It also has to do with the financing part. Where do we earn money? Healthcare. Earn it here. But if we want to treat every patient, which is our societal obligation, then we should transfer money from this to this. Otherwise, it will not work. But if you are working in this environment and you make a lot of money, you want to spend the money for your own improvement and whatever it is. You don't want to bring it to. That is a lot to do with the financing part. But from operations perspective, you should always split your operations. If there's a high volume, put it apart. Make it a flow shop. Make it efficient. And all the other ones you can keep in a job shop and you can make it very flexible. But as soon as if you mix those, you have poor flexibility and poor cost performance. Both are bad. Stuck in the middle. Interesting. Okay. Let's move to the last topic of today, which is the so-called order penetration point. And order penetration point is again about the design of a process, a characterization of processes, but then in terms to which extent can we actually see the customer order in the entire process. Okay, so here I have a simple process and I have two activities only. They are decoupled by inventory, so we have raw materials, half products, and products. So what's the idea here? Here I make the raw materials into half products, and here I make the half products, I assemble them into final order products. And the customer order decoupling point or the order penetration point is basically from the point of view from the customers, to which extent in the entire process can I see that we are working on the product or the service for that particular customer. And we have so-called decoupling points here, which are the inventory. So the first one that we meet here is the so-called make stock. So make the stock is we are just producing something and we put it in inventory here till a customer comes and picks it up. So it was never clear that we were making it for that particular customer. Only here, when the customer takes it out, then it becomes. Examples? What would be examples of making stock?
Supermarket.
Supermarkets. Yeah. Anything else? Everything you find in the retail, actually.
Warehouse, any kind of warehouse.
Right?
Retail warehouses.
Yeah.
Just
Yeah. Everything in retail is typically make the stock. We put it down in the shops, and then the customer comes in and say, "Hey, I like this," and then the customer buys it. Only then it's clear. If I go to the supermarket and I put the Heineken crate in my cart, only then it's clear that it was made for me. What's the advantage of make to stock? Cost, yeah, efficient. We can plan it. We are totally in charge. We don't have to wait for the customers. And another one. It's immediately available. We don't have to wait for it. It's already there. I go to the shop and I have it. Or I order it and it's there. Okay, on the other end of the spectrum, we have the purchase to order, but let's go to make to order. That's basically, I have the raw materials. They are just lying there. But only when the customer comes in, I will make the product. Another example there. Tailored suits, yeah. So they have all the garments there, and if they take my sizes and they make it according to needs, yeah. Restaurants, yeah. Restaurants, definitely. All the ingredients, and they make the meals out of it. Okay, very good. What is good about make to order? Flexibility, especially. We can make it according to the needs of the customer. Now, in between, we have what we call assemble to order. An assemble to order is basically we can plan it up to the raw, up to the half products, but we assemble the products according to the needs of the customer. Now, in operation and supply chain, this is frequently considered as the best of both worlds, because it's actually combining efficiency on the left-hand side, where planability and all those things, and flexibility in terms of customer needs on the right-hand side. What would be typical examples of assemble to order? Yeah, car manufacturing. You can actually go online and say, yeah, I want blue and I want this and that component and add it or delete it. Yeah, pretty much. Other examples?
Actually, want to say the other example, like restaurant.
Yeah.
A la carte restaurant.
In a certain way it is, but you can also say at the restaurant, okay, I want this, but this additional and this minus, etc. You just do it a la carte, and you might say it's assembled. Other examples, Dell computers have became famous, of course, with this whole concept, the direct concept, so basically exploring this idea. Can it also be used in services? Service industry. Actually, it's getting done more and more. Consultancy, we have all these quick scans, as they call it. You do 5 tests, and then you assemble the results of the 5 tests, and then you have a diagnosis, and from that you start actual consulting. Actually, this particular course, Operation and Supply Chain course, is assembled to order according to the needs of the Amsterdam Business School. I have other modules that I could have added or deleted, and other cases I can bring in. And oh, this topic is interesting. And that one, let's move that. It's assembled to order. Is that bad? No, it's actually very good. It's very efficient, and can be to a certain extent tailor-made. Insurances, pretty much nowadays. You say I want this to be insured and that component to be insured. You can add it and or remove it online. My favorite example is paint. Paint. Okay, I live in Breukelen. Breukelen is a very small city, maybe 10,000 people or so. And the other day we wanted to paint our house. That is, my wife wanted to have our house painted. That's the way it goes. And then the painter said to us, well, you have to choose a color and you have to go to this shop in Breukelen to decide on the color. So I went there and said, okay, we have to decide a color. What type of color do we have? And they say, oh, we've got 325 different colors. Ooh, all kinds of shades. So, okay, let me take it home. And we were talking and so, okay, let's have this color, color number 170. And then I thought, well, 325 colors on stock in Breukelen. I'm pretty curious how they do that. So I go there and say, I want 117, how many liters? So our painter has said this many liters. Yes, no problem, sir, I will make it for you immediately. Make it. Don't have it on stock? No, we don't have it on stock. How do they do it? Mixed. Yeah, it's mixed. So they have, well, there's 3 or 4 basic colors. They have kind of recipe and they for that, and then you have the color that you like. It's assembled to order. It's very nice. So in operations, this is really the way to go for you. Because you have both flexibility and low cost. So a very interesting concept. All kinds of industries. Let me close today's with a old story from this. It's actually the very first case in this whole idea of assembled to order. So that was kind of interesting to share with you. A real life case is from Hewlett Packard DeskJet printers. I'm getting so old that nobody knows what that is anymore. Vaguely remember what that was. Anyway, some years ago, Hewlett Packard was really the dominant party in printers, and you actually had 2 types of printers. There was DeskJet printers for home and LaserJet printers for at work. And this story is still about the DeskJet printers. You see still a picture here. And it used to be like this. They were producing all these things in Vancouver. That they were shipped by a container to the European Distribution Center, which was in Rotterdam. And from Rotterdam, they were shipping all the printers to the various countries in Europe. So when you get an order from Spain, they would ship the Spanish type of printer. And when you get from Italy, you get the Italy printers, etc., etc. And they were really different printers because different countries, especially at that time, but still nowadays, have different power systems, different plugs that you put in. If you go to UK, you have a different plug, and you go to Swiss, you have a different plug. Anyway, it's a little bit standardized now, but still there are the different plugs. And so they had different printers for different areas, so to speak. And the problem that they were faced with was that they had high inventories, so the total inventory was always high, but they also always had a shortage of one type of printer. So they have a lot of printers, let's say for the UK, but then they got a large order from Spain, and of course they were out of stock for Spain. And then a few months later, they got a large order from Swiss, and they were out of Swiss. So there are a lot of inventories there, but also always stock out. And in the case of stock out, you really have a problem. Because if you don't have a printer, let's say for Spain, then you have to place an order in Vancouver, and then they would make it in Vancouver. So they scheduled it sometimes, then you have 6 weeks of shipment time, and then finally you have the printers and you have to ship them out. So they said the responsiveness, the speed, was very low. So high inventories, a lot of stock outs, and low responsiveness. So they went desperate and said, we have to do something about this. So what can we do? They came up with all kinds of interesting ideas. The first idea is, why do we produce in Vancouver? Can we not produce for Europe in Rotterdam itself? So let's build a new plant here in Rotterdam and do that for the European market. At least we save the 6 weeks of shipping time, and that makes us more responsive. That was a big no-go. They didn't want to do that. Why not? Yeah, you lose the economies of scale that you have in Vancouver. You have to build a total new plant already. You have the capacity there, so you have overcapacity. So that was not considered good idea. Another smart idea was, yes, well, as soon as we have a shortage, why don't we fly them in? Because the 6 weeks of sea transport is way too long. We just put them in the plane and fly them over there in a day or maybe two, and then also a big no-go.
More expensive.
Yeah, so if you're a little bit into the air freight, you know that air freight is already quite tedious, but especially if the weight is high and bulky stuff, then it's a no-go area. It's way too expensive. And printers, way too big and too heavy. So, okay, so that were all ideas that didn't work, and then finally they come up with the idea that worked. And in hindsight, of course, everybody says yes. I could have thought of that myself, but they said, why don't we split between the power plugs and the printer itself? So let's make one printer for the whole of the world. And as soon as we get an order from Spain, we put in the Spanish plug. And as soon as we get an order from UK, we put in the UK plug. And that's the way we are going to do it. So we have standardized production here. We have only one inventory, standardized thing. And as soon as we get an order, we assemble it to order. That is, we connect the plug to the printer and then ship it out. And since these plugs are not very expensive, we can give inventories of all the plugs. That's not an issue at all. And that's what they did at the end. They call that postponement. Well, get something to order, but postponement, the idea is that we postpone part of the production with a little yellow box to once the order is in. That's what they call it. It brought them huge advantages. What's the advantage of doing this?
You're more flexible.
Yeah, so they got more responsive, way more responsive than ever. So that was their immediate problem was solved this way. They also got other benefits. Also cost benefits. Why would it be less costly? Right?
Less inventory and choices.
Yeah. Let's look at the inventory. So we only have one inventory here. We were having 6 inventories. If you have to maintain 6 inventory, then the total inventory will always be higher than if you only have one inventory. I always compare this to throwing a party. You want to throw a party, and you think, okay, I should have beer and wine. Okay, probably people want white wine, red wine, rosé wine, and we want people with this type of beer, this type of beer. So we should have everything. And you should have plenty, because you always see then when the party starts going and somebody's drinking red wine, then everybody wants red wine. And when somebody starts white wine, then everybody wants. So we should have everything. Whereas if you only have white wine, that's it. Take it or leave it, right? So you can have a lower total inventory. That works that way. So you can have lower inventory if you have only one item. So that saves them enormous. And of course, they also didn't have the short outs, which also saved them. Moreover, in Vancouver, they also had an advantage. Why is that? Yeah, even more standardization. They moved from batch, Spain, Italy, UK, to really mass. Again, having more efficiencies and more standardization and the economies of scale associated with that. So that made it into a huge success, the whole idea. Interesting enough, we also call this value-added logistics. Value-added logistics, what's the idea? Already we're in the logistics pipeline, we are in the distribution pipeline, and then in there we have a little bit of added value. Although in this case is from maybe 20 or 25 years ago, still today, the whole concept of value-added logistics is very important in the Rotterdam Harbor. Because in the Dutch economy, we say, yes, we are proud to have the Rotterdam Harbor or Schiphol or Amsterdam Harbor for that matter. But yeah, if only bulk material comes in and we just transship it through, we have all the pollution and all the traffic jams and everything. But what is the added value for the Dutch economy? If we don't add any services to it, it's just passing on the case. So we should be looking for value-added logistics. Very much the concept. get out of all the bulk stuff, see where we can add value, break bulk, and then add some services to it, and then it becomes interesting for the evaluator. So we try to find yellow boxes here instead of just moving through. Okay, I think that's it for today. See you next week.